My cousin live-streamed a family dinner where my mom called me a desperate failure, even though I had been secretly paying her six-figure medical bills for 5 years. She laughed while describing how pathetic my life was to thousands of viewers. So I blocked her number, drained the secret bank account, and watched her world crumble. Before I tell you how I went from the family disappointment to their biggest nightmare, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to cut off toxic family members to save yourself. My name is Zora, and at 32 years old, I manage crises for the biggest names in the NBA and politics. But to my mother, Vernice, I am nothing more than a glorified assistant with no husband and no future. The Thanksgiving dinner that changed everything started like any other. While my mother sat at the head of the mahogany table in her silk dress, adjusting her pearls, I was in the kitchen wrestling with a 20-pound turkey. "Zora, bring out the cranberry sauce," my mother shouted from the dining room, not even turning her head. "And do not forget the good wine glasses for your sister." I wiped my hands on my apron and grabbed the crystal glasses. I was wearing a simple cashmere sweater and jeans, which my mother called my janitor outfit. She had no idea the sweater cost more than her entire dining set. As I walked into the dining room, I noticed my 19-year-old cousin Darius in the corner. He had his phone propped up against a centerpiece, secretly recording for TikTok. He gave me a subtle wink. I did not know it then, but that phone was about to become the most dangerous weapon in the room. Just as I set the table, the front door swung open. My younger sister Tasha breezed in. Wearing a dress covered in so many Gucci logos, she looked like a walking billboard. Hanging on her arm was her husband Kyle. He was a white real estate agent who had not sold a house in 2 years, but walked around like he owned Atlanta. My mother's face lit up instantly. "There they are," she exclaimed, standing up to hug them. "The power couple has arrived. Kyle, honey, sit next to me. I made sure Zora prepared your favorite stuffing." Kyle tossed his coat at me without looking. "Thanks, Zora. Make sure you hang that up carefully, it is vintage." I caught the coat, fighting the urge to throw it into the fireplace. I knew for a fact he bought it at a thrift store because I was the one who paid off his credit card debt last month, anonymously, of course. Tasha sat down and immediately started complaining. "The traffic was terrible, Mom. We almost turned around. Zora, get me a sparkling water with lime. And hurry up, I am parched." I stood there for a second looking at them, my mother treating them like royalty while I was the help. Darius was zooming in on my mother's face with his phone. The show was about to start, and I was the only one who knew the script was about to flip. I placed the glass of sparkling water on a coaster in front of Tasha. She took a sip and immediately wrinkled her nose in disgust. "This is not cold enough, Zora. I specifically asked for crushed ice. You know I have sensitive teeth." Kyle let out a short, barking laugh and shook his head. "You can take the girl out of the trailer park, but you cannot take the trailer park out of the girl, right, Zora?" He smirked at me as if we were sharing a joke instead of him insulting me in my own mother's house. My mother chuckled along with him, dabbing the corners of her mouth with a linen napkin. "Now, Kyle, be nice. It is not Zora's fault she does not understand the finer things in life. She has always been a little slow to adapt to quality." She gestured for me to sit at the far end of the table, away from the turkey and the candelabras, like I was a child being sent to the kids' table. I sat down, folding my hands in my lap. I could feel the heat radiating from the kitchen still clinging to my skin, while Tasha sat there cool and pristine in her designer dress. My mother cleared her throat and tapped her glass with a spoon, demanding attention. "Before we eat, I just want to say how blessed I am." She looked lovingly at Tasha and Kyle. "To have a daughter who married so well. Tasha, you are the light of this family. A real estate empire, a beautiful home, and a husband who treats you like a queen. You are everything I prayed for." Then her gaze slid down the table to me. The warmth vanished from her eyes, replaced by a look of pity that felt sharper than a knife. "And then there is Zora." She sighed dramatically, a sound that seemed to suck the air out of the room. "I pray for you too, Zora. Every single night I ask the Lord why he gave one daughter wings and the other daughter anchors. The room went dead silent. Even Kyle stopped chewing. My mother continued, her voice dripping with fake maternal concern. Look at you, Zora, 32 years old and still answering phones for a living. Still driving that beat-up sedan that sounds like a lawnmower. Still single with no prospects. It is embarrassing, really. When my friends at church ask about you, I have to make things up because the truth is just too painful. She took a long sip of wine and delivered the blow that would end our relationship forever. You are a desperate failure, Zora. It breaks my heart to say it, but it is the truth. Your life is just pathetic. You are floating aimlessly while your sister and Kyle are building a dynasty. I just hope one day you find a man with a charitable heart who is willing to take on a burden like you. Because God knows you cannot take care of yourself. Tasha giggled behind her hand. Mom, stop. She's going to cry. Let her cry, my mother said, waving her hand dismissively. Maybe tears will wash away some of that mediocrity. I did not cry. I did not even blink. My eyes drifted past my mother's cruel smile to the corner of the room. Darius was still holding his phone up, but his jaw had dropped. I focused on the screen. The viewer count was ticking up so fast it was a blur. 12,000. 13,000. 15,000 people were watching this live. The comments were scrolling like a waterfall of rage. They saw her. For the first time in my life, the world saw Vernice for exactly who she was. She thought she was speaking to a captive audience of 3, but she had just confessed her cruelty to an army. I sat motionless for a moment, letting the weight of my mother's words hang in the air. Desperate failure, pathetic, burden. The insults did not sting the way they used to. Instead, they felt like a key turning in a lock, releasing me from a prison I had built myself. For years, I had equated financial support with love, hoping that if I just paid one more bill or solved one more problem, she would finally see me. But now, as 15,000 strangers watched her tear me apart, I realized the truth. She did not want a daughter. She wanted an ATM. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. My movements were slow and deliberate. Tasha stopped giggling and frowned. What are you doing, Zora? Put that away. We are eating. I ignored her. I unlocked my screen and opened my banking app. The interface glowed blue in the dim light of the dining room. I navigated to the scheduled transfers tab. There it was at the top of the list. Mom Medical VIP Care. $12,000 a month. It covered her private doctors, her imported supplements, and the luxury suite she demanded whenever she felt a phantom pain. I tapped cancel. A confirmation box popped up. Are you sure? I tapped yes. Next on the list was the mortgage payment for the house Tasha and Kyle were living in. Technically, the house was in my name, bought through an LLC to protect my privacy, but I let them play homeowner because Tasha said it was good for Kyle's image. $4,500 a month. Cancel. Yes. Then came the car lease for Kyle's vintage luxury sedan. $1,200. Cancel. Yes. Finally, I scrolled to the credit card I had given Tasha for emergencies, which she used for weekly spa days and Gucci dresses. I selected the card and hit freeze. Done. In less than 60 seconds, I had severed the financial arteries that kept their fantasy lives alive. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and stood up. My chair scraped against the hardwood floor, a harsh sound that made everyone jump. Where do you think you are going? My mother demanded, her fork halfway to her mouth. We have not even cut the turkey. Sit down, Zora. You are being rude. I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in years. I saw the fear behind the arrogance, the insecurity masked by cruelty. I picked up my purse from the floor. I am full, I said, my voice calm and steady. Full. You have not eaten a bite, Kyle scoffed. What is wrong, Zora? Did the truth ruin your appetite? I walked to the head of the table and leaned in close to my mother. She recoiled slightly, surprised by my proximity. Enjoy your dinner, Mom, I whispered. And tell Kyle he better start selling some houses, because that $12,000 pharmacy bill is due tomorrow, and I am not paying it. Her eyes widened in confusion, but before she could speak, I turned and walked out of the dining room. I did not look back at Tasha or Kyle. I did not look at the feast I had spent all day preparing. I walked straight to the front door, opened it, and stepped out into the cool Atlanta night. Behind me, I heard my mother shouting my name, but her voice sounded small and distant, like a ghost from a past life. I got into my car and locked the doors. For the first time in 32 years, I was free. I slid into the driver's seat of my black SUV. To the untrained eye, it looked like a standard luxury vehicle, but the door closed with a heavy, reassuring thud that only reinforced steel and ballistic glass could produce. My mother called it a lawnmower. My clients called it a tank. When you manage reputation crises for senators and point guards who have made bad decisions at 3 in the morning, you need a car that can handle a lot more than just traffic. I pressed the start button and the engine purred to life. It was a far cry from the sputtering mess my mother imagined I drove. I rested my forehead against the cool leather of the steering wheel and exhaled, shaking slightly. It was over. The years of hiding my success just to keep the peace were finally over. I had played the role of the struggling assistant, perfectly dimming my light so Tasha could shine, but tonight the bulb had finally shattered. My hand brushed against the glove compartment and a memory flashed in my mind so vivid it made me nauseous. 2 years ago, this same car, this same passenger seat. Kyle had been sitting there sobbing like a child. He had lost $50,000 on online poker, and the loan sharks were threatening to show up at Tasha's open house. He was shaking, sweating through his cheap suit, terrified that his house of cards was about to collapse. Please, Zora, he had begged, snot running down his nose. Tasha will leave me. You know how much image means to her. If this gets out, my career is over. They will ruin me. I had looked at him with the same pity my mother had just weaponized against me at the dinner table. I did not see a man. I saw a liability. But I also saw my sister's husband, and I knew that if he went down, he would drag her down with him. I reached into my bag and pulled out my checkbook, the one attached to my business operating account, the account that held retainers from A-list celebrities who trusted me with their lives. I wrote the check for $50,000 without blinking. Consider this an investment in my sister's happiness, I had told him, tearing the check out with a sharp rip. But this is the last time, Kyle. If you ever gamble again, I will let you drown. He had hugged me, swearing he would change, calling me his guardian angel, promising to pay me back every cent. Tonight, that same man had laughed while my mother called me a failure. He sat there in a vintage coat I paid for, eating food I bought, and watched me bleed out emotionally without saying a word. I opened my eyes and looked at the empty passenger seat. The ghost of that pathetic, grateful Kyle was gone, replaced by the arrogant leech I had just left behind. I shifted the car into drive. I had spent a decade fixing other people's mistakes, cleaning up their messes and shielding them from consequences. I was the best crisis manager in Atlanta because I had been practicing on my own family my entire life. But tonight, I had created a crisis I had no intention of fixing. I pulled out of the driveway, leaving the sprawling house in my rearview mirror. The lights were still on inside. They were probably still eating, still laughing, still confident that Zora would fix it tomorrow. Zora always fixed it. Not this time. I merged onto the highway, the city lights of Atlanta stretching out before me like a promise. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. Probably a notification from the bank, confirming the cancellations. Or maybe Tasha realizing her credit limit had just dropped to 0. I did not look. I just drove, letting the distance grow between the person they thought I was and the power player I actually was. The fixer had officially resigned. My phone was vibrating so hard it nearly walked off the marble nightstand. I rolled over in my king-sized bed, the high-thread count sheets cool against my skin, and squinted at the screen. It was 6 in the morning. Usually, this kind of activity meant one of my NBA clients had gotten arrested or a senator had tweeted something offensive. But this time, the notifications were not from work. They were from TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. I unlocked the phone and opened the first link. It was Darius' video. He had titled it POV. Your mom hates your successful cousin because she is not light-skinned and married to a broke white guy. The caption was brutal but accurate. The video had hit 3 million views overnight. Black Twitter had got a hold of it and they were dragging my mother and Tasha for filth. The comments were a stream of fire emojis and paragraphs analyzing the toxic family dynamic. People were dissecting my mother's cruel laugh. They were mocking Kyle's cheap suit. They were praising my calm exit. I was trending. Before I could even process the magnitude of the exposure, my phone screen changed. Tasha was calling. I stared at her name for a moment, feeling that old familiar knot in my stomach, the reflex to answer and fix whatever was wrong. But then I remembered the check I wrote for Kyle. I remembered the laughter at the dinner table. I swiped answer and put it on speaker. Zora, are you insane? Tasha screamed before I could even say hello. Her voice was shrill, hysterical. You have to take it down. You have to take it down right now. Good morning to you too, Tasha, I said, my voice raspy with sleep. I did not post anything. Talk to Darius. Darius will not answer his phone, she shrieked. This is your fault. You provoked Mom. You made a scene and now everyone is laughing at us. I have lost 2,000 followers since midnight. 2,000 Zora. Do you know what that does to my engagement metrics? I have a brand deal with a hair vitamin company pending. They are going to drop me if they think I am problematic. I sat up and rubbed my temples. Even now, in the middle of a PR disaster, she was only thinking about hair vitamins. You are problematic, Tasha, I said calmly. The video just showed the world who you really are. You are jealous, she spat. You have always been jealous of me and Kyle. You wanted to ruin our reputation because you are miserable and alone. Fix this, Zora. You work in PR, right? Fix it. Issue a statement saying Mom was joking. Say you were being difficult. Do whatever you have to do to make this stop. I actually laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Tasha seemed to freeze on the other end. I am a crisis manager, Tasha, I said. And my professional advice is that you cannot fix this. You cannot spin cruelty. You sat there and giggled while our mother called me a failure. You let your husband insult me after I paid off his gambling debts. The internet does not like bullies, and right now you look like the biggest bully in Atlanta. I am not a bully, she cried, her voice cracking. I am the victim here. You cut off my credit card, Zora. My card was declined at the gas station last night. I had to call Kyle to come get me, and he did not have gas money either. We were stranded for 2 hours. Welcome to reality, I said. It is cold out there, isn't it? You can't do this, she threatened. Mom is going to be furious when she finds out. Let her be furious, I said. I am done paying for your lifestyle, Tasha, and I am done being your punching bag. Good luck with the hair vitamins. Zora. Wait, do not you dare hang up on me. I will tell everyone you are a liar. I will. I tapped the red icon, ending the call mid-threat. Then I went to her contact settings. I scrolled down past the years of text messages asking for money, asking for favors, asking for validation. I tapped block caller. Then I did the same for Kyle. The silence that filled the room afterwards was the most peaceful thing I had ever heard. I laid back down and closed my eyes. The viral storm was raging outside, but in here, for the first time in my life, I was completely safe. I sat in my corner office overlooking the Atlanta skyline, sipping a latte that cost more than the hourly wage my mother thought I earned. The morning sun reflected off the glass buildings, creating a dazzling display of light that felt like a personal spotlight on my new life. My assistant had just briefed me on a crisis involving a senator and a leaked audio tape, but my mind was surprisingly clear. For once, the chaos belonged to someone else. My personal phone buzzed on the mahogany desk. I glanced at the screen expecting another hysterical message from Tasha, or maybe a notification from my security team. Instead, the name Mom flashed across the display. I stared at it for a moment, fascinated by the sheer audacity. After the public humiliation at dinner, after the viral video, after I had walked out without a word, she was texting me as if it were just another Tuesday. I swiped open the message, bracing myself for an apology I knew would never come. Zora, stop being dramatic and answer your phone, the text read. I hope you are done with your little tantrum because I have important business. Dr. Allister says I need to switch to the Swiss imported joint supplements. The American ones are giving me heartburn. They are $2,000 a supply, but you know my health is delicate. Transfer the money to the concierge pharmacy immediately so they can ship it overnight. Also bring my dry cleaning when you come to apologize. I read the message twice just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. She truly believed nothing had changed. In Vernice's world, I was a static object, a utility that existed solely to service her needs. The idea that I could actually leave, that I could turn off the tap, was so foreign to her, it did not even register as a possibility. She thought my exit was just a performance, a flare-up of temper that would settle back into obedient servitude once I cooled down. $2,000 for vitamins. I thought about the car I drove for 5 years with a broken air conditioner so I could pay for her hip surgery. I thought about the nights I ate ramen noodles in my first apartment while paying for her private room at the hospital because she claimed the noise in the general ward gave her migraines. She had no idea. She did not know that the credit card on file at the pharmacy had been canceled 12 hours ago. She did not know that the VIP status she cherished was tied to my bank account, not her charm. She was standing on a trapdoor I had already opened, and she was demanding I polish her shoes before she fell. I did not reply. I did not type out a furious paragraph reminding her of what she said. I did not block her yet. I wanted to see it happen. I wanted to see the moment reality collided with her delusion. I set the phone back down and took a sip of my coffee. The silence from my end was not passive. It was the deep breath before the plunge. She was waiting for a transfer confirmation. What she was going to get was a decline notification that would shake the foundations of her world. Kyle pulled his leased vintage Jaguar into the busiest gas station in Buckhead. He loved that car almost as much as he loved the image it projected. To the world, he was a successful real estate mogul closing deals between golf games. In reality, he was a man who had not paid for a tank of gas in 3 years. He popped the fuel door and didn't even look at the price per gallon. Why would he when he wasn't the one paying the bill? He slid the platinum credit card into the reader. It was a heavy metal card that made a satisfying clink. It had his name on the front, but my bank account routed to the back. He selected the most expensive premium fuel and squeezed the handle. Nothing happened. The pump screen flashed a message he had never seen before. See cashier. Kyle let out a dramatic sigh, slapping the side of the car. He adjusted his sunglasses and marched into the convenience store, looking at the attendant with pure disdain. Turn on pump 4, he commanded, tossing the card onto the counter. And make it quick. I have a meeting. The attendant, a teenager who clearly did not care about Kyle's imaginary schedule, picked up the card and swiped it. The machine let out a harsh buzzing noise. Declined, the kid said, sliding the card back. Kyle laughed a short, incredulous bark. That is impossible. That is a platinum card with an unlimited limit. Run it again. You probably swiped it wrong. The kid shrugged and swiped it again. Same buzz, same message. Actually, sir, it says pickup card. That means the issuer wants me to take it, but I do not get paid enough to fight you for it. Do you have another way to pay? Kyle patted his pockets. He never carried cash. He barely carried his own wallet. His face began to heat up as a line formed behind him. He snatched the card back and stormed out to the car. He pulled out his phone and dialed Tasha. Pick up, he hissed. Tasha answered on the 4th ring. What, Kyle? I am at the checkout at Sephora. I am filming a haul video. The card is not working. Kyle panicked. Zora must have forgotten to pay the bill. Call her and tell her to fix it immediately. I am stuck here with an empty tank and people are staring. Tasha sighed loudly into the phone. You are so helpless. Fine, hold on. Let me just pay for this. I have $300 worth of serums scanned. I could hear the beep of the register through the phone line. I could hear the cashier ask for payment. And then I heard the silence. Mom, this card has been declined. What do you mean declined? Tasha snapped her voice, losing its influencer sweetness. Run it again. It is a black card. It says the account has been closed by the primary account holder. The silence on the line was deafening. Kyle stood by his gas pump holding a useless piece of metal. Tasha stood in the mall holding a basket of cosmetics she could not buy. For the first time in their lives, the concept of consequence was crashing down on them. The invisible safety net I had held under them for a decade had vanished, and they were currently in freefall. Zora. Tasha whispered into the phone, her voice trembling with sudden terrifying clarity. She actually did it. She cut us off. Kyle looked at his fuel gauge, which was hovering on empty. He looked at the luxury car he could not start. He looked at the long walk home in his thrift store loafers. For the first time, he realized that the road ahead was going to be very long and very hard. Vernice sat in her favorite armchair in the sunroom, adjusting the thermostat to a perfect 72 degrees. She smoothed the fabric of her silk robe and glanced at the antique grandfather clock. It was 1:55 in the afternoon. The delivery van from Buckhead Concierge Pharmacy was usually pulling into her driveway right now. She needed her Swiss joint supplements. The American ones simply did not agree with her constitution, she told anyone who would listen. They were chalky and pedestrian, while the imported ones were refined, just like her. She picked up her phone, ready to text her prayer circle about Zora's ungrateful outburst the night before. She had already drafted a message asking for prayers for her wayward daughter who had been possessed by a spirit of rebellion. But before she could hit send, an incoming call flashed on the screen. It was the pharmacy. Vernice smiled smugly. They were probably calling to apologize for being 5 minutes late. She answered with her most imperious voice. This is Vernice. I hope you are calling to tell me the driver is at the gate. I have a tea appointment at 3 and I cannot be waiting around all afternoon for my medication. There was a pause on the other end. It was not the usual cheerful receptionist. It was the head pharmacist, Mr. Henderson. His voice was stiff and professional, stripped of the usual fawning warmth she was accustomed to. Mrs. Williams, I am afraid we cannot dispatch the driver today. We have a significant issue with the payment for this month's order. Vernice let out a sharp laugh. Payment issue. Mr. Henderson, do not be ridiculous. You have the card on file. It is the Platinum Business Card. Just run it again. Their machine was probably broken. Technology was so unreliable these days. I have run it 3 times. Mrs. Williams, Mr. Henderson said, and his tone dropped an octave. It has been declined every single time. The error code indicates that the account has been closed by the primary cardholder. Vernice felt a cold prickle at the base of her neck. Closed. That was impossible. Zora managed that account. Zora handled everything. She would never dare close the account that kept her mother healthy. She was just throwing a tantrum, she would fix it eventually. There must be a mistake, Vernice snapped, sitting up straighter. Call Zora. She handles the administrative details. I am sure she just forgot to update the expiration date. She is very scatterbrained lately. We attempted to contact the primary cardholder, Mr. Henderson interrupted. We were informed that unauthorized charges from this account would be reported as fraud. Mrs. Williams, the total for this shipment is $12,400. These are custom imports. If we do not receive a valid form of payment within the hour, we are required to return the inventory to the temperature-controlled vault. We cannot hold them for you. The room seemed to tilt. $12,000. Vernice did not have $12,000. She did not even have $1,200. Her entire lifestyle was a house of cards built on Zora's bank account. You cannot do that, she screeched, losing her composure. I need that medication. I am a VIP client. I have been with you for 5 years. You were a VIP client because the bills were paid, Mr. Henderson said coldly. Without payment, you are just a customer with an expensive unfunded order. You have 59 minutes, Mrs. Williams. Do you have another card? Vernice stared at the phone, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. She looked at her purse sitting on the table. Inside was a debit card with maybe $50 on it. She realized with terrifying clarity that the pain in her knees was about to get very real. The line went dead, leaving her sitting in the silence of a house she suddenly realized she could not afford to heat. Vernice adjusted her oversized sunglasses and marched through the glass doors of the Buckhead Wellness Institute. This was her sanctuary. The air here smelled of lavender and exclusivity. For 5 years, she had come here twice a month for vitamin drips and checkups, enjoying the gold tier status that Zora paid for. She walked past the main reception desk without stopping, heading straight for the private elevator that led to the VIP lounge. She needed a cucumber water and a massage chair immediately. The stress of the pharmacy fiasco had given her a migraine, and she fully intended to bill Zora for the distress. She pressed the elevator call button. Nothing happened. She pressed it again, harder. The light did not turn on. She tapped her foot impatiently, wondering why the staff was slacking off. Mrs. Williams. The voice came from the main desk. It was Brenda, the head receptionist, who usually greeted Vernice with a warm smile and a compliment on her hat. Today, Brenda was not smiling. Her face was set in a mask of professional, polite indifference. "The elevator requires a valid keycard," Brenda said loud enough for the people in the lobby to hear. "Yours has been deactivated." Vernice froze. She turned slowly, her face heating up. "Excuse me. There must be a glitch in your system. I am a gold member. My daughter handles the billing. Fix it immediately, or I will speak to the director." "There is no glitch," Brenda replied, typing something on her keyboard without looking up. "We attempted to process your monthly retainer of $5,000 yesterday. The transaction failed. We tried the backup card. It also failed. We called the primary account holder, Zora Williams." Vernice let out a breath she did not know she was holding. "Good. Finally. You called Zora. She probably straightened this whole mess out. She is so incompetent sometimes, forgetting to update expiration dates. Tell me what she said so I can go upstairs." "She said the cards were canceled." Brenda said, her voice flat. "She said that she is no longer responsible for your medical expenses. She instructed us to remove her billing information from our system entirely. As of this morning, your membership is suspended due to non-payment." The lobby seemed to spin. Vernice gripped the edge of the desk to steady herself. Suspended. The word tasted like ash. She looked around. A young couple was whispering and looking at her. A man in a suit was checking his watch, impatient for her to move. "I need to see Dr. Allister," she hissed, leaning over the counter. "I have an appointment. I am in pain." "Dr. Allister only sees gold members," Brenda said, not backing down. "If you have a medical emergency, you are welcome to visit the urgent care clinic on the first floor. They accept standard Medicare and there is a copay. The waiting time is currently 4 hours. Urgent care." The words were an insult. Urgent care was for people who did not have connections, people who did not have successful daughters. Vernice felt a surge of rage. "You cannot do this to me. I am a pillar of this community. I will sue this hospital. I will have your job." Security to the front desk. Brenda spoke into her headset, her eyes never leaving Vernice's face. 2 large guards stepped out from the hallway. They did not look like they cared about Vernice's status in the church choir. They looked like they were ready to escort a trespasser off the premises. Vernice realized with a jolt of terror that she had no power here. Her power had always been Zora's money. Without it, she was just an old woman with a bad attitude and no insurance. She stepped back, clutching her purse to her chest. "Fine," she spat, trying to salvage a shred of dignity. "I will sit in the waiting room. But when my son-in-law Kyle hears about this, he will buy this building and fire all of you." She turned and walked toward the crowded, noisy public waiting area. Babies were crying. The TV was blaring a soap opera. The chairs were hard plastic bolted to the floor. As she sat down, squeezing between a coughing man and a woman eating chips, she pulled out her phone. She needed to call Kyle. He was a businessman. He would fix this. He had to. Tasha paced back and forth in the living room of the Buckhead mansion, her heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floors. Her phone was hot in her hand, buzzing incessantly with calls from her mother. Vernice was hysterical, claiming she was sitting next to a man with a hacking cough in the public waiting room and demanding Kyle wire $5,000 to the hospital immediately to reinstate her VIP status. Tasha turned on her husband. Kyle was slumped on the white leather sofa, his head in his hands, looking nothing like the confident real estate mogul she bragged about on Instagram. "Fix this, Kyle," she screamed, throwing a decorative pillow at him. "Mom is humiliated. Zora thinks she can play games with us, but we have our own money. Wire the funds now. Or better yet, go down there and buy the hospital wing just to spite her. Show everyone who the real provider is." Kyle did not move. He did not reach for his phone. He did not pull out his checkbook. He just made a sound that sounded like a wounded animal whimpering in a trap. "I cannot, Tasha," he whispered, his voice breaking. Tasha stopped pacing. She stared at him, her perfectly drawn eyebrows knitting together in confusion. "What do you mean you cannot? Just transfer it from the investment account. Or use your commission from the Buckhead estate sale you closed last week. Stop being lazy and help my mother." Kyle looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed and bloodshot, and for the first time Tasha saw pure terror in them. "There is no commission, Tasha. There is no investment account. It is gone. All of it." The silence in the room was heavy and suffocating. Tasha laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound that bounced off the high ceilings. "Stop joking. This is not the time for your dry humor." "I am not joking," Kyle said, his voice rising to a desperate shout. "I lost my real estate license 6 months ago, Tasha. The firm let me go for underperformance. I have not sold a house since last year." Tasha felt the blood drain from her face. She grabbed the edge of the sofa to steady herself. 6 months. You left the house every morning in a suit. You told me you were going to closings. Where did you go?" "Starbucks," Kyle admitted, putting his head back in his hands, unable to look at her. "I went to Starbucks and traded crypto on my phone. I thought I could make it back. I thought if I just hit one big coin I could fix everything before you noticed. But the market crashed, Tasha. I lost the savings. I lost the emergency fund. I even took out a predatory loan online just to pay the car lease last month. We are negative. We are so far in debt, I cannot even buy a tank of gas." Tasha stared at him, the man she had married for stability, for status, for the image of the perfect interracial power couple. He was a fraud. A broke, unemployed fraud who had been playing dress-up with her life. "So everything we have?" she whispered, looking around the room at the expensive art, the designer furniture, the life she loved. "Who has been paying for it?" Kyle looked at her with pleading, pathetic eyes. "Zora. It has always been Zora. She covers the mortgage. She covers the credit card bills. She covers your mother's medical expenses. She knew I was struggling, and she covered it to protect your image. Without her, we are destitute, Tasha. We are going to lose everything. You have to call her. You have to beg her. We need Zora to save us." Tasha wiped under her eyes carefully, smudging her waterproof mascara, just enough to look devastated but still photogenic. She adjusted the ring light until it washed out her complexion, making her look pale and fragile. This was a performance, and she had rehearsed it 1,000 times in her head. She knew she was cornered. Kyle was broke, the bank accounts were empty, and her mother was sitting in a public waiting room like a commoner. The only currency Tasha had left was her victimhood. She hit the Go Live button on Instagram. The viewer count spiked immediately, fueled by the drama of the previous night's viral video. She waited a beat, letting the silence build tension, then looked directly into the lens with trembling lips. "Hey guys," she whispered, her voice cracking perfectly. "I know everyone saw the video from dinner. I know what it looked like. But there is so much you do not know. There is a dark side to my sister Zora that we have protected you from for years. She took a shaky breath, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Zora is not the hero here. She is a deeply unhappy woman who has been jealous of me since the day I was born. She hates that I found love. She hates that Kyle adores me. Last night she did not leave because she was hurt. She left because she finally found a way to punish us for being happy. Tasha leaned into the camera, her eyes wide and pleading. She cut off my mother's life-saving medication, guys. My mother has a heart condition. She needs those treatments to survive. Zora knows this. She has access to the accounts because she stole the passwords years ago and insisted on controlling the finances to manipulate us. And now because Mom made one harmless joke about Zora needing to get her life together, Zora decided to let our mother die. The comments section flooded with hearts and angry emojis directed at Zora. Tasha fed off the energy. She felt the power returning. She was controlling the narrative again. It is not just Mom. She continued, her voice gaining strength. She froze our accounts. She is trying to make us homeless. She has always been obsessed with Kyle. She cannot stand that he chose me. It is sick, honestly. She wants to see us on the street because if she cannot have this life, she does not want anyone to have it. Please, she begged, tears finally flowing freely, real tears born of her own terrifying reality, but repurposed for the screen. Please pray for my mom, and pray for Zora. Pray that she finds peace in her heart before she destroys this family completely. We are just trying to survive her rage. She ended the stream and slumped back in her chair. The likes were pouring in. The narrative was shifting. She looked over at Kyle, who was watching her from the doorway with a mixture of awe and disgust. She wiped her face dry. There she said, her voice cold and steady. Now the internet thinks she is a monster. She will have to turn the money back on just to make it stop. I sat at the head of the conference table in my glass-walled office overlooking the Atlanta skyline. Across from me sat Trayvon Booker, the starting quarterback for the Falcons. He was 6'4" and 250 pounds of pure muscle, but right now he looked like a scared child. He was sweating through his designer shirt, terrified that a video of him arguing with a bouncer was going to end his career. "It is handled, Trayvon," I said, sliding a thin black folder across the marble surface. "The video has been scrubbed. The bouncer signed a non-disclosure agreement an hour ago. You can go back to practice. Just stay out of clubs for a month." Trayvon let out a breath that sounded like a tire deflating. "You are a magician, Zora. I do not know how you do it. I do it because I understand leverage," I said, taking a sip of my sparkling water. My personal phone buzzed on the table. It was a notification from Instagram. "Tasha Williams mentioned you in a live video." I frowned. Tasha never tagged me. She usually pretended I did not exist so she could maintain the illusion that she was the only successful sibling. "Excuse me for 1 second, Trayvon." I tapped the notification. Tasha's tear-streaked face filled my screen. She was wailing about me cutting off our mother's medication, accusing me of trying to kill Vernice out of jealousy. She claimed I stole passwords and froze accounts out of spite. The comments were vicious, calling for my head. I watched for a full minute. Most people would have panicked. Most people would have felt their heart race seeing thousands of strangers calling them a monster. But I was not most people. I was a crisis manager. I dealt with senators caught in hotels and billionaires caught embezzling. Watching my sister lie on the internet was not a crisis. It was evidence. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. Tasha thought she was destroying me. In reality, she was handing me a blank check for a defamation lawsuit that would bury her. She had just accused me of attempted murder and financial theft on a recorded platform. I picked up my encrypted work phone and dialed the number at the very top of my favorites list. Marcus Vance. He answered on the first ring. His voice was deep, smooth, and dangerous. The voice of a man who billed $800 an hour and never lost. "I am watching it," Zora Marcus said, before I could even speak. "She is hitting all the legal markers. Defamation per se, libel, intentional infliction of emotional distress. She even admitted to using the credit cards you pay for while claiming you stole them. It is a prosecutor's dream. I leaned back in my leather chair, crossing my legs. I want you to go nuclear, Marcus. File the suit. But before that, I want you to trigger the audit clause on the house. The house, Marcus asked, a hint of surprise in his voice. You are going to evict them. Not yet, I said, watching Tasha wipe her nose on her sleeve on the screen. I want a forensic audit of every dime I funneled into that LLC. I want to prove Kyle was misappropriating funds intended for property maintenance. Once we have that, we do not just evict them, we prosecute them. Consider it done, Marcus said. And Zora, happy hunting. I hung up the phone and placed it face down on the table. The smile was still playing on my lips. I looked back at Trayvon, who was staring at me with a mixture of awe and fear. Family drama, I said, simply picking up my pen. Now, Trayvon, let us discuss your public apology statement. I want you to focus, because unlike my sister, you can still be saved. Tasha adjusted the ring light in the foyer of the Buckhead estate. She needed to pivot. The victim narrative had worked well overnight, but now she needed to remind her followers that she was still rich, still fabulous, and still better than them. She smoothed down her silk robe and practiced her smile in the mirror. It was brittle, but it would hold for a 15-second story. Hey guys, she chirped into her phone, forcing a brightness she did not feel. I know things have been crazy, but I am not letting the negativity dim my light. I am about to unbox these amazing new candles for the living room. Stay tuned. She reached for the box on the console table, but before she could open it, a heavy pounding shook the front door. It was not the polite tap of a delivery driver. It was the authoritative thud of someone who had the law on their side. Tasha frowned and ended the recording. She peeked through the side window. A nondescript sedan was parked in the circular driveway right behind Kyle's useless Jaguar. A man in a windbreaker was standing on the porch holding a clipboard and a roll of bright orange tape. She opened the door a crack. Can I help you? You are interrupting my work. Are you Tasha Williams? The man asked without looking up from his clipboard. Yes, Tasha said, lifting her chin. And if you are selling something, we are not interested. We have a security system. I am not selling anything, ma'am, the man said. He peeled a large neon orange sticker off a backing sheet. I am here to post a notice of default and intent to foreclose on this property. Tasha swung the door open fully, forgetting her carefully curated angles. Foreclose? You are insane. We own this house. My husband is a real estate mogul. Get off my porch before I call the police. The man ignored her completely. He slapped the orange sticker right onto the center of the hand-carved mahogany door at eye level. The adhesive was strong and the color was violent against the dark wood. It screamed legal trouble. According to the records, this property is owned by Z Squared Holdings LLC, the man said, stepping back to take a photo of the posted notice. The mortgage payments have ceased, and the primary guarantor has invoked the immediate acceleration clause. You have 30 days to vacate the premises before the sheriff returns to remove your belongings. Have a nice day. Tasha stood there, mouth agape, as he walked back to his car. She tried to peel the sticker off, but it shredded under her fingernails, designed to be tamper-proof. Oh my God, did you see that? The whisper came from the sidewalk. Tasha whipped her head around. Mrs. Jenkins, the neighborhood watch president, was standing at the end of the driveway walking her prize-winning poodles. She was staring directly at the orange sticker, her eyes wide with glee. Beside her was the neighborhood gossip columnist for the local newsletter. They were both looking at the house like it was a car wreck. Tasha slammed the door shut, her heart hammering against her ribs. She leaned her back against the wood, sliding down until she hit the floor. The orange sticker was on the other side, beaming her failure to the entire street. Zora did not just cut off the money. She had owned the house the whole time. Tasha had just been a guest in her sister's empire, and now the eviction notice was public knowledge. Kyle. She screamed, her voice shrill with terror. Kyle, get down here. The bank just tagged the door. The neighbors saw everything. We are losing the house. Vernice adjusted her silk scarf over her nose as she stepped out of her Uber. She had refused to drive her own car to this part of town. This was a neighborhood she usually only saw on the evening news during crime reports. It was where she believed Zora lived, in a cramped one-bedroom apartment suitable for a low-level assistant. She marched up the cracked concrete walkway of the aging complex, ignoring the loud rap music blaring from a nearby balcony. She was furious, humiliated at the hospital denied her medication and ignored by her own daughter. It was time to put the fear of God back into Zora. She reached the door of apartment 4B and pounded on it with her manicured fist. Zora opened this door immediately. Vernice shouted, her voice echoing in the dingy hallway. I know you are in there hiding. You think you can cut off my medicine and get away with it. Open up, or I will use my key. She dug into her purse and pulled out the spare key Zora had given her 5 years ago. She jammed it into the lock and twisted. It did not turn. She jiggled it, frustrated. Zora must have changed the locks, the ungrateful wretch. She pounded again, harder this time. I am not leaving until you apologize and fix this. Zora. Vernice screamed. The door swung open abruptly. Vernice prepared to launch into her tirade, finger raised in accusation. But the person standing there was not Zora. It was a large, shirtless man with face tattoos holding a half-eaten sandwich. He looked down at Vernice with mild annoyance. Who are you? The man asked. And why are you banging on my door, lady? Vernice took a step back, clutching her pearls instinctively. Where is Zora? Where is my daughter? Tell her to come out. The man took a bite of his sandwich and chewed slowly, staring at her. Zora. You mean the lady who lived here before me? Before you, Vernice sputtered. What are you talking about? She lives here. She has lived here for years. Lady, I have lived here for 3 years, the man said, leaning against the doorframe. Zora moved out a long time ago. She said she was buying a place uptown, a penthouse or something. She gave me her old microwave because she said she would not need it where she was going. Vernice felt the world tilt on its axis. 3 years. Zora had moved 3 years ago. During those 3 years, Vernice had cashed thousands of dollars in checks, accepted countless gifts, and complained about Zora's lack of ambition, all while having absolutely no idea where her daughter laid her head at night. That is a lie, Vernice insisted, her voice rising in panic. She is a failure. She cannot afford a penthouse. She sends me money. She does not spend it on herself. The man shrugged. Look, lady, all I know is she pulled up in a moving truck that cost more than this building, and she looked pretty rich to me. Now get off my porch before I call the cops. He slammed the door in her face. Vernice stood alone in the hallway, the smell of stale cigarettes and old cooking oil surrounding her. She pulled out her phone to call Tasha to get the real address, but her hands were shaking. For the first time, she realized she did not know Zora's address. She did not know her job title. She did not know her friends. She had spent a decade cashing checks from a stranger she called daughter. And that stranger was apparently rich enough to leave her behind without looking back. Vernice stood outside the pawn shop on the edge of downtown, clutching her purse so tightly her knuckles turned white. It was a far cry from the private jewelry boutiques she was used to, but desperate times called for desperate measures. She needed cash, and she needed it now before the lights at the mansion were cut off. Inside her bag was the emerald and diamond set Zora had gifted her for her 60th birthday. Vernice remembered the day clearly, Zora presenting the velvet box, the gasp of the guests, the way the gems caught the light. It was insured for $80,000. Surely she could get at least 40 for it today, enough to pay the pharmacy and perhaps book a weekend at a spa to recover from this stress. She pushed open the door, ignoring the chime that announced her arrival. The man behind the counter looked up. He had grease under his fingernails and eyes that had seen every lie in the book. I am here to sell a very high-value item, Vernice announced, placing the box on the glass counter. Please handle it with care. These are Colombian emeralds. The man opened the box without a word. He pulled out a jeweler's loupe and screwed it into his eye. Vernice tapped her fingers on the counter, impatient. Well, hurry up, she snapped. I do not have all day. I expect a wire transfer, not cash. I do not carry large sums on my person. The man dropped the loop and looked at her. He did not look impressed. In fact, he looked annoyed. I can give you $50 for the setting, he said, pushing the box back toward her. But honestly, it is not worth the shelf space. Vernice laughed, a harsh, incredulous sound. $50? Are you insane? That necklace is worth $80,000. My daughter bought it from Tiffany. Look at the hallmark. It is a good replica, lady, the man said, shrugging. But it is paste, glass and gold-plated brass. The weight is wrong. The clarity is too perfect. It is costume jewelry. High-end maybe, but still fake. Vernice felt the blood drain from her face. Fake? That was impossible. She had worn this to the mayor's gala. She had flaunted it at church. Unless... A memory flashed in her mind. 2 years ago. Zora had asked to borrow the set to have it professionally cleaned and inspected. She had taken it for a week. When she brought it back, it looked shinier than ever. She swapped them. Vernice whispered, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. She stole my jewels and replaced them with glass. The man behind the counter laughed. Sounds like your daughter is smarter than you think. If she knew you would end up here, she probably did you a favor. At least the real ones are safe somewhere. Vernice grabbed the box and stumbled out of the shop. She stood on the sidewalk, hyperventilating. Zora had known. Even back then, Zora had known that this day would come. She had protected the family assets from her own mother. Vernice looked at the glittering, useless glass in her hand. It was just like her life right now, shiny on the outside and completely worthless underneath. Kyle sat in the leather driver's seat of his leased Jaguar, the engine cold and silent. The orange eviction sticker on the front door of the house seemed to mock him, glowing under the porch lights. Inside, he could hear Tasha screaming at her assistant on the phone, trying to salvage a brand deal that was already dead. He was cornered. He had no money, no job, and no dignity left. But he had one thing he thought was an ace up his sleeve. He pulled out his phone and opened a hidden folder he had encrypted months ago. He had spent his last few $100s on a dark web service that generated deepfake images. He scrolled through them. They were graphic, compromising photos of a woman who looked exactly like Zora in situations that would end the career of a high-profile crisis manager. He had saved them for a rainy day, and it was currently pouring. His thumbs flew across the screen, trembling with a mix of adrenaline and fear. He attached 3 of the most explicit images to a text message addressed to Zora. I know you think you hold all the cards, Zora, he typed, his breath hitching. But you have a reputation to protect. Your clients trust you because you are clean. Imagine what happens when these hit the blogs tomorrow morning. $50,000. That is the price of my silence. Wire it to the crypto wallet below by midnight, or I hit send to every gossip site in Atlanta. Do not test me. He hit send. The swoosh sound of the message delivering felt like a gunshot in the quiet car. He leaned back, wiping sweat from his forehead. She would pay. She had to pay. 50,000 was pocket change to her, but her reputation was priceless. He convinced himself he was just taking what he was owed. She had cut him off without warning, so this was just business. Across the city, in her penthouse office, Zora watched the message pop up on her screen. She was in the middle of reviewing a non-disclosure agreement, but the image preview made her pause. She picked up the phone and opened the text. She did not gasp. She did not panic. She zoomed in on the photos with the clinical detachment of a surgeon. The lighting was wrong, the skin tone on the neck did not match the face perfectly, and the timestamp on the metadata, which Kyle was too stupid to scrub, showed the files were created 3 months ago. It was a bluff. A clumsy, criminal bluff. Zora did not feel fear. She felt the cold, hard satisfaction of a chess player watching her opponent move his king into a checkmate. Extortion, cyberstalking, intent to distribute non-consensual pornography. Kyle had just handed her a felony conviction on a silver platter. She did not type a reply. She did not give him the satisfaction of a reaction. Instead, she took a screenshot of the text, the images, and the demand for money. She opened her secure email and typed in the address of Detective Marcus Holloway, the head of the Cybercrimes Division, and a man who owed her a favor for keeping his daughter's due-eye out of the papers. Subject: attempted extortion and blackmail, she typed. Attached is evidence against Kyle Henderson. He is currently at the Buckhead address. Pick him up. She hit send. Kyle was sitting in his driveway waiting for a wire transfer. What he was going to get was a raid. He wanted to play dirty, but he forgot that Zora wrote the rulebook on dirt. She set the phone down and took a sip of her water. The clock was ticking toward midnight, but not for her. I stared at the screen of my phone, looking at the grainy, fabricated images Kyle had sent. Most women would have been terrified. They would have panicked at the thought of their face superimposed on such compromising material being blasted across the internet. They would have frantically wired the money hoping to buy silence. But Kyle had made a critical error in judgment. He forgot that my entire career was built on distinguishing between real threats and desperate bluffs. He also forgot that I did not operate on fear. I operated on facts. I did not type a single word in response to him. I did not give him the satisfaction of seeing the 3 dots that would indicate I was typing. To him, the silence must have felt like hesitation, like I was scrambling to find the funds. In reality, the silence was the sound of a trap snapping shut. I took a deep breath and centered myself. This was no longer a family squabble. This was a felony. I pressed the power button and the volume button, simultaneously taking a screenshot of the text message. Then I took another of the images, then a third of the timestamp and his contact information at the top of the screen. I opened the metadata of the images he sent, confirming their origin was a known deepfake generator site. I compiled everything into a single PDF file. I opened my secure email client. In the recipient field, I typed 2 addresses. The first was Marcus Vance, my attorney. The second was Detective Marcus Holloway, the head of the Atlanta Police Department's Cyber Crimes Unit. I had helped Detective Holloway navigate a media storm last year when his precinct was under fire, and he owed me a favor. But he would not need a favor to act on this. This was an open and shut case of extortion and cyberstalking. In the subject line, I typed one word in all capital letters: extortion. In the body of the email, I kept it clinical and precise. Attached is evidence of an attempt to blackmail me for $50,000 by Kyle Henderson. The suspect is currently located at the Buckhead residence. He has threatened to release non-consensual pornographic material if the demand is not met by midnight. I am requesting immediate intervention. I hit send. The action felt heavy and final, like dropping a gavel. There was no going back now. I had just handed my brother-in-law over to the justice system. I waited for a moment, watching the progress bar complete. Sent. My phone buzzed almost immediately. It was a text from Marcus Vance. I have the email. I am forwarding this to the district attorney directly. Do not engage with him, Zora. Let the police handle the pickup. I set the phone down on my marble desk. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere in the distance, in the driveway of the house I paid for, Kyle was sitting in his car, checking his crypto wallet, waiting for a transfer that would never come. He was counting down the minutes to midnight, thinking he was about to become rich. He had no idea that the only thing heading his way was a squad car. He wanted to play the villain, so I decided to let him be the villain in a court of law. I turned off the lights in my office and sat in the dark waiting. The clock on the wall ticked steadily toward midnight, marking the end of Kyle's freedom and the beginning of my absolute victory. Tasha sat on the edge of her beige velvet sofa. The one she had bragged cost $10,000, but had actually been purchased on a payment plan she was now 3 months behind on. Her phone felt heavy in her hand. She needed money. Not a lot, just enough to keep the water running and maybe pay the housekeeper to keep her mouth shut about the foreclosure notice on the door. She scrolled through her contacts past the promoters and the stylists until she landed on Bianca. Bianca was supposed to be her best friend. They had matched outfits at the last 3 galas. Surely Bianca would understand a temporary liquidity issue. She pressed call. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. Tasha hung up and texted, "Hey girl, so random, but my bank is doing a security audit and froze everything for 24 hours. Can you Venmo me 1,000 just until tomorrow? I will send back 1,500 for the trouble." She watched the 3 dots appear, then disappear, then appear again. Finally, a message popped up. It was not a transfer notification. It was a screenshot. It was a screenshot of a group chat Tasha was not in. The chat was named "No Moochers Allowed." In the screenshot, another friend named Keisha had posted a text from Tasha asking for money just 10 minutes ago. Below it, Bianca had written, "She is hitting everyone up. It is getting sad." Tasha's breath hitched in her throat. She had been exposed. The circle of elite Buckhead wives and influencers she had spent 5 years clawing her way into was closing ranks against her. They smelled poverty, and they hated the scent. She tried to type a defense to say it was a joke, but then she saw the notification at the top of the screen. "You have been removed from Buckhead Bell's Lux." She opened Instagram. She went to Bianca's profile. A photo had just been posted. It was the whole squad minus Tasha at a brunch at Le Bilboquet. The caption read, "Keeping the circle tight and the vibes rich. No fakes allowed." Tasha zoomed in on their faces. They were laughing. They were drinking mimosas. And they were relieved she was not there. For years, Tasha had thought these women loved her. She thought they admired her style, her handsome husband, her perfect life. But they did not love her. They loved that she paid for the table. They loved that she brought the champagne. Now that the tap was dry, she was not a friend, she was a liability. She was the one thing they feared becoming broke. Tasha threw the phone across the room. It bounced off the rug and landed face down. The silence in the mansion was absolute. She was not just broke, she was socially dead. Vernice cornered Darius in the kitchen of the Buckhead estate. The house felt colder than usual, likely because the smart thermostat had entered energy-saving mode after the utility bill went unpaid, but Vernice's eyes were burning hot. She gripped her nephew's shoulder with a strength that belied her supposed frailty. She looked nothing like the polished church mother of yesterday. Her wig was slightly askew, and her makeup was smudged from her panic attack at the pawn shop. "You know where she is?" Vernice hissed, giving him a little shake. "Do not lie to me, boy. You and Zora have always been thick as thieves. You were the one filming that video. You know everything." Darius tried to pull away, but she dug her nails into his hoodie. "I do not know, Auntie," he stammered, playing the part of the confused teenager perfectly. "Zora does not tell me anything. She blocked me too, remember?" "Liar," Vernice spat. "You are always on that phone. You track people for fun. You found Tasha's ex-boyfriend when he tried to skip town. Find Zora. I need her address, Darius. I need to go there and make her see reason. She is confused. She is having a breakdown. I am her mother. I need to save her." Darius looked at his aunt. He saw the desperation behind the anger. She did not want to save Zora. She wanted to save herself. She wanted the credit cards turned back on. She wanted the pharmacy to deliver her pills. She wanted the illusion of her life back. "If you do not find her," Vernice threatened, lowering her voice to a dangerous whisper, "I will tell your mother about that little stash you keep in your car. I will tell the pastor you have been skipping Sunday school to go to the arcade. Do not test me, boy. I will ruin you." Darius swallowed hard. He hated her in that moment. But he was smart. He knew that fighting her openly would only make her dig in deeper. He needed to buy Zora time. "Okay, Auntie." "Okay," he said, raising his hands in surrender. "I will look. I can try to trace her digital footprint. But it might take a while. She is using a VPN or something. She is ghosting hard. Just find her." Vernice released him, smoothing her silk robe as if she hadn't just been threatening a 19-year-old. Bring me an address by tonight. Or else. She turned and marched out of the kitchen muttering about ungrateful children. As soon as she was gone, Darius slumped against the counter. He pulled out his phone. His hands were shaking slightly. He opened an encrypted messaging app, the one Zora had told him to use years ago for emergencies. He typed quickly, his thumbs flying across the screen. Code read Zora, she is losing it. She tried to pawn the fake jewelry, and now she is cornering me for your location. She threatened to snitch to my mom. I am stalling her, but she is desperate. She thinks you are having a breakdown, but we both know she is the one cracking. Watch your back. She is coming for you. He hit send and watched the message disappear into the ether, secure and untraceable. He deleted the app from his home screen, just in case Vernice decided to snatch his phone next. He grabbed a bag of chips from the pantry and walked out to the patio, acting casual. He would play the game. He would pretend to search. But he would never give up the location of the only person in this family who had ever treated him with respect. Zora was safe as long as he was the one hunting her. Vernice collapsed onto the chaise lounge in her bedroom, clutching her chest. The pain was different today. It was not the usual dull ache she used to manipulate Zora into upgrading her hospital suite. This was sharp and radiating. Her breath came in short, ragged gasps. The stress of the last 48 hours was taking a physical toll on a body that had been pampered into fragility. She reached for the bottle of generic aspirin she had bought at the gas station earlier, but her hand trembled so badly she dropped it, sending white pills scattering across the Persian rug. Her phone rang on the nightstand, cutting through the silence of the empty house. She snatched it up, hoping it was Darius with an address, or maybe Tasha saying she had found a way to fix things. It was Dr. Alistair. Vernice felt a wave of relief, so potent it nearly made her dizzy. Dr. Alistair. He must have realized his mistake. He was calling to apologize, to tell her the VIP status was restored and the ambulance was on its way. She answered, breathless. Doctor, thank God you called. This has been a nightmare. I am in terrible pain. You need to send the car. I am ready to come in now. Mrs. Williams. Dr. Alistair's voice was grave. It lacked the usual soothing bedside manner she paid for. I am looking at your latest labs from the urgent care center. They forwarded them to my office as a professional courtesy. We need to talk about your heart. Vernice froze. My heart. It is just stress, doctor. I told you I am under a lot of pressure. It is more than stress, Vernice. The lack of your specialized medication combined with extreme hypertension has caused a significant arterial blockage. The Swiss formula you were taking was managing this, but without it, your system is crashing. You are in the early stages of a cardiac event. Fear, cold and absolute, washed over her. So fix it. I am coming in. Get the suite ready. That is the other reason I am calling Mrs. Williams. The procedure you need is a specialized angioplasty. It requires a specific stent that insurance does not cover fully, especially your basic Medicare plan. To perform this surgery at our facility, given your current suspended membership status, we require payment up front. Payment, Vernice whispered. How much? $50,000, Dr. Alistair said, his voice devoid of emotion. That covers the facility fee, the surgical team, and the post-operative care in the cardiac unit. We need the deposit wired within 2 hours to prep the theater. If you cannot pay, I strongly suggest you call 911 and go to the county hospital immediately. Their wait times are significant, but they cannot turn you away for instability. The line went dead. Vernice stared at the phone. $50,000. She did not have $50. She looked at the scattered aspirin on the floor. She looked at the silent, luxurious room that was really just a coffin with crown molding. For the first time, she realized that Zora had not just been paying for her lifestyle. Zora had been paying for her life. And now the bill was due. Vernice stood before the deacon board of Greater Hope Baptist Church, clutching a lace handkerchief to her chest. She wore her most modest Sunday suit, a black ensemble that she usually saved for funerals. It was a calculated choice intended to visually represent the death of her spirit. This was her home turf. For 30 years, she had been a pillar of this congregation, judging the hemline of every skirt and the piety of every prayer. She knew exactly which buttons to push to mobilize this room. Pastor Michael sat at the head of the polished oak table, his face etched with grave concern. Beside him sat the elders, men and women Vernice had potlucked with for decades. They looked at her with a mixture of pity and horror, waiting for her testimony. Vernice let out a ragged breath, making sure the microphone picked up the tremble in her voice. She allowed her shoulders to slump, portraying a woman crushed by the weight of a thankless child. Brothers and sisters, I come to you today not as a church mother, but as a broken woman. She began, her voice quavering perfectly. You all know my daughter Zora. You remember her singing in the youth choir. You remember the sweet, obedient girl I raised in these very pews. Sister Patterson in the front row nodded sympathetically, murmuring a soft amen. But that girl is gone, Vernice continued, letting a single tear slide down her cheek right on cue. The Zora you see now is not my daughter. She has been taken over by a spirit of greed and malice. Since she entered that godless world of high-power crisis management, she has changed. She worships money now, not the Lord, and that money has twisted her soul into something unrecognizable. She paused for effect, leaning heavily against the podium as if her physical strength was failing her. She pressed a hand to her heart, the same heart Dr. Allister had warned her was failing. I have been diagnosed with a critical heart condition, she lied, omitting the fact that it was caused by withdrawal from unnecessary luxury supplements. The doctors say I need emergency surgery immediately. It costs $50,000. Zora has the money. We all saw the internet. We know she is rich. But when I asked her for help, do you know what she said? The room was deadly silent, waiting for the horror. She laughed. Vernice whispered, dropping her head. She laughed in my face. She said she hopes I die so she can finally be free of me. She said she would rather burn the money than use it to save the woman who gave her life. She has abandoned me. She has blocked my number. She has left her own mother to die in pain while she lives in a penthouse and parties with celebrities. Gasps rippled through the room. This was the ultimate transgression. In their community, abandoning your elders was a sin worse than theft. I believe she is under a dark influence, Vernice cried, grabbing the edge of the pulpit until her knuckles turned white. She is possessed by resentment and pride. I am asking the church to intervene, not just for my physical body, but for her eternal soul. We need to bring her back to the light. We need to break this hold the devil has on her wallet. Pastor Michael stood up, his face hardening with righteous indignation. Sister Vernice, we will not let this stand. The church protects its own. We will go to her. We will make her see reason. Vernice slumped into the arms of a deaconess, weeping loudly into her shoulder. She had done it. She had weaponized the entire congregation against her daughter. Zora might have money, but Vernice had God on her side, and she was about to bring a holy war to Zora's doorstep. Pastor Michaels adjusted his collar as he stepped out of the elevator onto the 45th floor of the Sovereign Tower in downtown Atlanta. He had expected a cramped cubicle or perhaps a shared workspace in a nondescript building on the outskirts of the city. That was the picture Vernice had painted of her daughter's struggling career as a lowly assistant. Instead, he found himself standing in a lobby that smelled of white tea and old money. The floors were Italian marble, polished to a mirror shine that reflected his scuffed dress shoes. The walls were adorned with modern art pieces that looked abstract and expensive, the kind of paintings that cost more than his entire church building fund. A receptionist with flawless skin and a headset that looked like a piece of jewelry greeted him without smiling. I am here to see Zora Williams, he said, trying to project the authority he held in the pulpit on Sundays. I am her pastor. Do you have an appointment? The receptionist asked, her fingers hovering over a sleek keyboard. I am on a spiritual mission, he blustered, feeling his confidence waver slightly under her cool gaze. It is an emergency regarding her mother. She stared at him for a moment, analyzing him before picking up the phone. She spoke in a hushed tone, then nodded. Ms. Williams will give you 5 minutes between meetings. Security will escort you. A man in a black suit emerged from the shadows. He looked more like a Secret Service agent than a mall security guard. He led the pastor down a long glass corridor. They passed conference rooms filled with people shouting into phones and pointing at screens displaying news feeds and social media trends. The energy was electric, terrifying, and undeniably powerful. When the guard opened the heavy double doors at the end of the hall, Pastor Michaels actually stopped walking. He had been inside the mayor's office once. He had visited the homes of wealthy deacons, but he had never seen anything like this. Zora's office was a fortress of glass suspended above the city. The view was panoramic, stretching from Buckhead all the way to the airport. The furniture was low, sleek, and leather, designed to intimidate rather than comfort. On the walls, framed jerseys signed by NBA legends hung next to photos of Zora shaking hands with senators and tech moguls. There were awards for excellence in public relations and crisis management glinting on the shelves. This was not the office of an assistant. This was the war room of a general. Zora sat behind a desk that looked like it was carved from a single block of obsidian. She was wearing a white suit that was tailored to perfection, her hair pulled back in a severe, elegant bun. She did not look like the girl who used to sing in his choir. She looked like a queen on her throne. She was on the phone, speaking in a low, rapid-fire cadence. "Tell the team to release the statement at noon," she said into her headset. "And if the tabloids run the story, sue them. I want a retraction by dinner." She tapped her headset, ending the call, and finally looked at the pastor. She did not stand. She did not offer him a seat. She just looked at him with eyes that were cold and unreadable. "Pastor Michaels," she said, her voice devoid of the warmth he remembered. "To what do I owe the pleasure of this intrusion?" He swallowed hard, clutching his Bible tighter. The speech he had prepared about humility and honoring thy mother suddenly felt very small in this room built on power. He looked at the woman he had come to scold and realized with a jolt of fear that he did not know her at all. Pastor Michaels cleared his throat, trying to summon the fire and brimstone he used on Sunday mornings to intimidate sinners. "Zora, this office is impressive, I will grant you that, but no amount of worldly success justifies abandoning your mother in her hour of need. She is sick, Zora, her heart is failing, and you have the means to save her, but you refuse. The Bible says honor your father and your mother. It does not say honor them only when it is convenient or cheap. The church cannot stand by while you let a woman of God suffer." Zora simply stared at him. She did not blink. She reached into a drawer in her obsidian desk and pulled out a thick, leather-bound folder. It landed on the desk with a heavy thud that echoed in the silent office. "A woman of God." Zora repeated, her voice flat. "Is that what we are calling her today? Interesting choice of words, Pastor, considering you were the one who audited the Grace and Mercy Building Fund 10 years ago." The pastor froze. His grip on his Bible loosened slightly. "I do not know what you are talking about. That was a clerical error. The funds were misplaced." "They were not misplaced," Zora said, opening the folder. "They were stolen. $25,000 meant for the soup kitchen and the roof repair. Gone in 3 months." "Do you remember who the treasurer was at the time, Pastor?" "It was Vernice Williams." She slid a paper across the desk. "It was a copy of a bank transfer dated a decade ago. And do you see who replaced that money 2 days before the police were going to be called? That is my signature on the check, Pastor. I was 22 years old, working 3 jobs, and I drained my entire savings to keep my mother out of prison. I bought her freedom, and I bought your silence because the church could not afford the scandal." The pastor looked at the document. His face turned an ashen shade of gray. He remembered. Of course he remembered. He just had not known that the check came from Zora. Vernice had told him it was a miracle inheritance from a distant aunt. "My mother is not sick because of stress," Zora continued, her voice cutting like a laser. She is sick because she is going through withdrawal from luxury supplements she does not need. And the reason I cut her off is because I am done paying for her sins. Now you came here to threaten me with the wrath of the congregation. Let me be clear, Pastor. If you or anyone from Greater Hope Baptist Church mentions my name in a sermon or a prayer circle again, I will release this entire file to the IRS and the local news. I will show them that the church mother they idolize is a thief and a liar. She closed the folder. Now get out of my office. Pastor Michaels stood up slowly. He looked at the woman behind the desk and then at the door. He did not say a prayer, he did not quote scripture. He realized that in the game of judgment, Zora held the gavel. He turned and walked out of the room, his footsteps silent on the expensive carpet, leaving Zora alone with the truth he was too cowardly to speak. Tasha sat in the driver's seat of her white Range Rover, parked at the far end of a Starbucks parking lot. She was stealing their free Wi-Fi because the internet at the mansion had been cut off an hour ago. The darkness of the car hid the fact that her designer makeup was 3 days old. She adjusted the camera angle to hide the tears in the leather upholstery caused by Kyle throwing his keys in a rage. She hit record on TikTok. Her followers were waiting. They were hungry for dirt, and Tasha was ready to feed them. "Hey guys," she whispered into the phone, looking over her shoulder, as if she were being watched to add dramatic effect. "I have been reading your comments. You are all asking the same thing. How does Zora afford it? How does a girl who claims to be an assistant pay for private hospitals and luxury leases?" She paused, letting the question hang in the air. A tear escaped her eye, carefully timed. "I tried to protect her," she continued, her voice trembling. "I wanted to believe she had a real job. But the truth is, Zora has a secret life. She disappears for days at a time. She comes home with expensive bags, but won't say where she got them. She takes trips to Dubai and Miami with men twice her age." Tasha leaned closer to the screen, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial hush. "My sister is not a businesswoman, guys. She is a sugar baby. That is where the money comes from. She sells herself to old rich men, and then she uses that dirty money to control us. That is why she is so bitter. She hates herself for what she does, so she punishes us for being a real family. She is jealous that I have a husband who loves me while she only has clients who pay her." The video uploaded, and within minutes the comments section exploded. People love a scandal, especially one involving sex and money. The rumors spread like wildfire. Hashtags like Sugar Baby Zora began to trend locally. Tasha smiled for the first time in days. If she could not be the rich sister, she would be the moral one. She would paint Zora as a woman of loose morals, stripping away the one thing Zora had always had over her dignity. High above the city, Zora watched the video on her tablet. She was not alone. Her assistant Marcus was standing by the window looking furious. "Do you want me to release her employment records, Zora?" Marcus asked, his hand hovering over his phone. "I can prove she has never held a job for longer than 3 months while you built an empire." "No," Zora said, her voice calm and amused. "Let her talk. Let her dig this hole so deep she can never climb out. She thinks I am a sugar baby. That is perfect. It means she has absolutely no idea who I am or what I am capable of." She stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the city lights. Tomorrow night was the grand gala, the biggest charity event of the year. Tasha would try to crash it. Zora knew her sister too well. Tasha would come to expose her, to catch her in the act with a sugar daddy. "Let her believe it," Zora said, turning back to Marcus. "Because when she walks into that ballroom tomorrow thinking she is going to catch a whore, she is going to find a queen. And that realization is going to hurt more than any lawsuit I could ever file." The St. Regis Atlanta was glowing like a diamond dropped into the heart of Buckhead. Searchlights swept the night sky, and a line of black limousines snaked around the circular driveway, depositing the city's elite onto a velvet red carpet. This was the Horizon Gala, the most exclusive black tie event of the season, where tickets started at $5,000 a plate and the guest list was tighter than a bank vault. Tasha adjusted the strap of her gold sequined gown in the reflection of a parked car around the corner. She and Kyle had not arrived in a limo. They had taken a rideshare that smelled of stale fries and had the driver drop them off a block away, so no one would see them emerging from a Toyota Camry. Tasha looked stunning on the surface, but underneath the glamour she was sweating. The dress still had the tag tucked inside, intended to be returned tomorrow if she could keep the champagne stains off it. Kyle looked less composed. His tuxedo was tight around the waist, a relic from 3 years ago, and his eyes darted around nervously. He was terrified that the police were already looking for him after Zora's text, but Tasha had convinced him that Zora was bluffing. She told him that Zora would never arrest family. She told him they needed to be here to expose Zora and reclaim their narrative. "Do you have the tickets?" Tasha hissed, checking her makeup in her compact mirror one last time. Kyle patted his pocket. "I got them from a guy I used to know in the club scene. Cost me the last of the cash from pawning my watch. He said they are legit, but if they scan red, we are going to jail." Tasha. "Stop being so paranoid," Tasha snapped, linking her arm through his. "We belong here, Kyle. Look at us. We are the best-looking couple in Atlanta. Once I get a picture of Zora hanging off some old billionaire, everyone will know I was telling the truth. We will be heroes." They walked toward the entrance, putting on their best smiles for the paparazzi who were flashing cameras at actual celebrities. No one took a picture of Tasha and Kyle, but Tasha waved anyway, pretending the screams of fans were for her. They reached the check-in desk where a team of event planners with clipboards stood guarding the golden gates. "Name, please," the woman asked, not looking up. Kyle handed over the crumpled QR codes printed on plain paper. The woman frowned, smoothing out the paper. She held her scanner over the code. Tasha held her breath. A red light would mean humiliation. A green light meant revenge. The machine beeped, a sharp, piercing sound. Tasha squeezed Kyle's arm so hard, her nails dug into his suit. The woman looked at the screen, then tapped it. "It says these seats are in the overflow section near the kitchen," she said with a polite but dismissive smile. "But you are cleared. Welcome to the Horizon Gala." Tasha let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. They were in. They walked through the double doors, and the noise of the outside world vanished, replaced by the swell of a live orchestra and the murmur of billionaires making deals. The ballroom was transformed into a winter wonderland with crystal ice sculptures and white roses hanging from the ceiling. It smelled of money, it smelled of power, of... Tasha scanned the room, her eyes hunting. She was not here for the lobster or the networking. She was here for Zora. She needed to find her sister. She needed to find the sugar daddy. And she needed to destroy them both before the night was over. The ballroom lights dimmed, signaling the start of the main program. A hush fell over the crowd of 500 elegantly dressed guests. Tasha and Kyle were squeezed into a small table near the kitchen doors, next to a swinging door that kept hitting Kyle's chair every time a waiter passed. Tasha ignored the indignity. She had her phone out, recording discreetly under the table napkin. She was scanning the VIP tables near the stage, looking for Zora. She expected to see her sister tucked away in a corner, maybe pouring wine or sitting on the lap of some ancient donor. But Zora was nowhere to be seen. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice boomed over the speakers, rich and resonant. "Please welcome to the stage the woman who made tonight possible, the founder of Z-Squared Global and our diamond sponsor for the 3rd year in a row, Ms. Zora Williams." Tasha dropped her phone. It clattered onto the bread plate, cracking the screen protector. She stared at the stage, her mouth hanging open. A spotlight hit the velvet curtains as they parted. Zora walked out. She was not wearing a skimpy dress or a uniform. She was wearing a custom silver gown that looked like it was made of liquid starlight. It fit her perfectly, commanding attention, without asking for it. Her hair was styled in intricate braids, adorned with small diamonds that caught the light with every movement. She walked to the center of the stage with the confidence of someone who owned the floor of the building and probably the city block. The crowd erupted. It was not polite golf clapping. It was a roar of genuine enthusiasm. People were standing up. Senators, athletes, tech CEOs, they were all on their feet cheering for Zora. Tasha felt like she was in a fever dream. This was not her sister. This was not the girl who drove a used sedan and wore jeans to Thanksgiving. This woman looked like royalty. Zora smiled at the audience, and the giant screens on either side of the stage projected her face in high definition. She looked radiant, powerful, and untouchable. "Thank you," she said, her voice clear and steady, without a hint of nerves. "Tonight is about resilience. It is about taking the broken pieces of our community and building something stronger. We have raised $5 million this evening, and I am proud to match the first million personally." The crowd went wild again. Kyle choked on his water. $1 million, he wheezed, his eyes bulging. "She just gave away $1 million, Tasha. That is 20 times what I tried to get from her." Tasha could not speak. Her mind was racing, trying to reconfigure reality. Zora was not a sugar baby. She was the bank. She was the power. And Tasha was sitting by the kitchen door recording a video that was about to destroy her own life. She looked down at her phone where the live stream was still running. The comments were scrolling fast, but the tone had changed. Viewers were confused. "Wait, isn't that the sister who is supposed to be broke?" one comment read. "She just donated $1 million. "Tasha, you lied," another wrote. Tasha snatched the phone up, her hands trembling. She had to stop this. She had to twist it. She had to find a way to make this look like a scam. "She is lying," Tasha whispered fiercely into the phone, her voice shaking. "It is fake money. It is a performance. Watch. I am going to expose her right now." She stood up, smoothing her sequined dress. She ignored Kyle's frantic whispers to sit down. She marched toward the stage, pushing past waiters and dignitaries. She was going to ruin this moment if it was the last thing she did. She was going to scream until everyone looked at her. She was going to make Zora pay for being everything Tasha was not. Tasha pushed past a waiter balancing a tray of champagne flutes, ignoring his startled gasp as glass shattered on the floor behind her. She did not look back. Her eyes were locked on Zora, who was still center stage, basking in applause that felt like a physical assault on Tasha's ego. The live stream on her phone was still running, the viewer count climbing as people tuned in for the chaos she promised. "She is a fraud," Tasha screamed, her voice cutting through the applause like a siren. She raised her phone high, filming herself walking down the center aisle. "Do not believe her. She does not have $1 million. She steals from her own mother. She is a liar." The room fell silent. 500 heads turned toward her. Security guards started moving from the perimeter, but Tasha was faster, fueled by adrenaline and desperation. She reached the edge of the stage. Zora looked down at her. Her expression did not change. She did not look scared. She did not look embarrassed. She looked bored. "Get off the stage, Zora!" Tasha shrieked, climbing the stairs, her dress catching on a monitor. "Tell them the truth. Tell them how you let Mom suffer. Tell them how you ruined my life because you are jealous." Tasha reached the podium, breathless and wild-eyed. She shoved her phone camera into Zora's face. "Say hi to the internet, Zora. Tell them about your sugar daddy. Tell them who really paid for this dress." Zora leaned into the microphone. Her voice was calm, amplified to fill the entire ballroom. "Hello, Tasha," she said. "I see you found a way to make tonight about you. Congratulations. But since you are recording, let us give your followers something real to watch." Zora gestured to the giant screen behind her. The image of her face disappeared, replaced by a video feed. It was not a promotional video. It was a security camera recording. It showed Tasha standing in Zora's home office, rifling through a desk drawer, stuffing cash into her purse. The timestamp was from 3 years ago. The crowd gasped. Tasha froze, her phone trembling in her hand. That is deepfake, she yelled, her voice cracking. That is AI. You made that up. No, Tasha. Zora said, her voice cold. That is you stealing $5,000 from the petty cash drawer I keep for emergencies. I never pressed charges because I pitied you. But since you want to talk about theft, let us talk about the $50,000 Kyle extorted from me yesterday. Zora signaled to the tech booth. A new image appeared on the screen. It was the screenshot of Kyle's threatening text message, complete with the fake photos and the demand for crypto. The ballroom erupted in murmurs of shock and disgust. Tasha looked at the screen, then at Zora. Her face was pale, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly. The livestream comments were scrolling so fast they were unreadable, but the emojis were clear. Trash cans, clowns, police cars. Zora stepped closer to Tasha, lowering her voice so only the microphone picked it up. You wanted exposure, Tasha, Zora said. You wanted the world to see us. Well, they see us now. They see a woman who built an empire and a sister who tried to burn it down because she was too lazy to build her own. Now get off my stage before I have you arrested for trespassing. Tasha looked out at the crowd. She saw the judgment in their eyes. She saw the phones pointed at her, recording her humiliation from every angle. She looked back at Zora, who stood tall and radiant, a queen dismissing a peasant. Tasha realized with terrifying clarity that she had not just lost the battle. She had lost the war, the narrative, and her dignity, all in under 3 minutes. And the worst part was she had live-streamed every second of her own destruction. Tasha stood frozen on the stairs of the stage, her face burning with a mixture of rage and confusion. She expected the crowd to turn on Zora. She expected booing. She expected the older men in the front row to look ashamed of their paid companion. Instead, she saw something that made her blood run cold. A tall, distinguished man in a tuxedo rose from the center table. It was Mayor Franklin, the man who had just won re-election by a landslide. He did not look angry. He looked impressed. He walked straight to the edge of the stage, ignoring Tasha completely, as if she were nothing more than a piece of furniture. He extended his hand to Zora. "Brilliant move, Zora," he said, his voice booming without a microphone. "You handled that heckler with the same precision you used to handle my debate crisis last fall. I still owe you for that polling strategy. It saved my campaign." Zora smiled, shaking his hand firmly. "Just doing my job, Mr. Mayor." Crisis management is all about controlling the narrative. Before Tasha could process that the mayor of Atlanta was thanking her sister, another figure approached. This time it was Marcus King, the A-list actor, whose face was on billboards all over the city. He hopped onto the stage with easy grace and pulled Zora into a hug. "You are a legend, Zora," he laughed. "I thought I had drama on set, but this is next level. Serious question though, are you free next week? The studio wants to kill my new project because of that leaked email. I told them Zora Williams is the only person who can fix it. Name your price." Tasha felt her knees buckle. Her phone was still recording, but her hand had dropped to her side, capturing only the expensive carpet. The comments on her live stream were scrolling so fast they were a blur, but she caught phrases that made her stomach churn. "Is that the mayor? She knows Marcus King. Wait, she is not a sugar baby, she is their boss. Tasha, you are a clown." The realization hit her like a physical slap. The trips to Dubai, the late-night meetings, the expensive bags. They were not gifts from lovers. They were payments from clients. Zora was not selling her body. She was selling her mind. She was the woman powerful men called when they were afraid. She was the fixer, the strategist, the power behind the throne. Tasha looked at her sister. Zora was standing in the center of a circle of the most powerful people in the city. They were not ogling her. They were deferring to her. They treated her with a respect Tasha had never seen before. A respect that could not be bought with a Gucci belt or a leased car. One of the security guards finally stepped forward, his hand reaching for Tasha's arm. But Zora held up a hand, stopping him. "Wait," Zora said, looking down at Tasha with eyes that held zero warmth. Let her see. Let her see exactly who I am. Zora turned back to the mayor and Marcus King, engaging them in a conversation about media cycles and damage control. She spoke their language fluently. She was one of them. Tasha realized with a sick, sinking feeling that she was not just the poor sister anymore. She was the fool who had tried to dethrone a queen with a plastic spoon, and the entire world was laughing at her. The two security guards moved with the synchronized precision of men who handled threats for a living. They did not ask Tasha to leave. They did not offer her a polite escort. One guard clamped a hand around Tasha's upper arm, his fingers digging into the flesh with bruising force. The other moved on Kyle, who was attempting to hide behind a decorative ice sculpture of a swan. "Get your hands off me!" Tasha shrieked, her voice cracking into a high-pitched wail that echoed off the vaulted ceilings. "Do you know who I am? I am an influencer. I have rights. You are assaulting a public figure." The guard ignored her completely. "Ma'am, you are trespassing and creating a public disturbance. You are leaving now." He began to drag her toward the exit. Tasha dug her heels into the plush carpet, her gold-sequined dress straining at the seams. She flailed wildly, her phone still clutched in her hand, the camera swinging in dizzying arcs that captured the ceiling, the chandeliers and the shocked faces of the elite guests. The live stream was still running, broadcasting her humiliation in high definition to the thousands of people she had invited to witness her triumph. Kyle saw the second guard approaching and tried to run. He scrambled toward the kitchen doors, slipping on the polished marble floor and landing hard on his knees. The guard hoisted him up by the collar of his cheap tuxedo, lifting him until his feet dangled inches off the ground. "I did not do anything." Kyle blubbered, tears streaming down his face. "She made me come. I am just the driver. Please do not arrest me." The crowd parted like the Red Sea, creating a wide path for the security team. Guests held up their own phones, recording the spectacle from every angle. Tasha saw the flashes. She saw the sneers. She saw the way the mayor shook his head in disgust. She tried to twist her body back toward the stage, desperate for one last attempt at manipulating the narrative. "Zora." She screamed, her face contorted and ugly with mascara running down her cheeks. "Help me! Tell them to stop! We are sisters! How can you let them do this to family?" I stood on the stage watching the scene unfold with a glass of champagne in my hand. I did not flinch. I did not look away. I met Tasha's desperate gaze across the ballroom and felt absolutely nothing. The cord was cut. The obligation was gone. I turned my back to her and resumed my conversation with Marcus King. The guards shoved the double doors open and hauled Tasha and Kyle out into the humid Atlanta night. They did not stop at the valet stand. They marched them past the line of waiting limousines, past the red carpet photographers who turned to snap photos of the woman being ejected, and threw them onto the concrete sidewalk at the edge of the property. Tasha landed hard on her hip, her phone skittering across the pavement. Kyle collapsed beside her, sobbing into his hands. "Stay off the property," the head guard warned, his voice flat and bored. "If we see you again, you leave in a police cruiser." He turned and walked back inside the heavy doors, sealing shut with a finality that felt like a judgment. Tasha crawled over to her phone. The screen was cracked, but still glowing. The live stream had ended, but the comments were still visible. Thousands of them. Laughing emojis, trash can icons, people tagging their friends to watch the replay. She had wanted to be the star of the show. She had wanted everyone to look at her. Now, sitting on the dirty sidewalk in a ripped dress with a weeping husband, she realized she had gotten exactly what she wished for. The internet moves faster than light, and within minutes of Tasha being thrown onto the pavement, the hashtag #SugarBabyZora was dead, replaced by something far more terrifying. Who is Zora? Tasha sat in the dirt, her gold dress ruined by street grime, staring at her cracked phone screen. She expected the live stream to be the end of her humiliation, but the internet detectives were just getting started. They were dissecting the footage frame by frame, and what they found was destroying the last shred of Tasha's reality. A verified user with a blue checkmark posted a thread on Twitter that went viral instantly. They broke down the interaction on the stage with forensic precision. "That is not a girlfriend or a mistress," the user wrote. "That is Zora Williams. Do you guys know who that is? She is the ghost of Atlanta. She is the reason why Senator Davis is still in office after that hotel scandal. She is the reason why the rookie quarterback did not go to jail last season. She does not date rich men. She saves them." The comments flooded in, like a tidal wave of truth washing away Tasha's lies. People began posting screenshots of press releases Zora had ghostwritten and legal strategies she had orchestrated. A popular political blogger chimed in confirming the rumors. "I have interviewed her off the record twice. Zora Williams is the highest paid crisis manager in the South. Her retainer starts at $50,000 a month. Tasha really tried to expose the woman who holds the keys to the city. This is clown behavior of the highest order." Tasha felt nausea rise in her throat. She scrolled past a side-by-side photo. One side was Zora in her high-rise office, the other was Zora on stage being hugged by Marcus King. The caption read, "Imagine calling your sister a failure when she is literally the person celebrities call when their lives fall apart." Zora is not securing the bag. She is the bag. A prominent gossip blog, The Shade Room, posted the definitive confirmation. Exclusive. "We can confirm the diamond sponsor of the Horizon Gala is none other than Zora Williams, owner of Z Squared Global. Our sources tell us she matched the first $1 million in donations tonight. While her sister was busy getting evicted and arrested, Zora was busy changing tax brackets. She is not a sugar baby. She is the sugar." The realization hit Tasha harder than the security guard had. All those times Zora had disappeared for work, she was not meeting men. She was meeting lawyers. She was meeting fixers. She was running a shadow empire that kept Atlanta spinning, and Tasha, in her infinite arrogance, had tried to paint her as a whore. She looked at Kyle, who was wiping snot from his nose with his torn sleeve. They had not just attacked a sister, they had attacked an institution. And now everyone knew that the money, the house, the lifestyle, it all came from the very intellect they had mocked. Zora was a legend, a myth made flesh, and Tasha was just the punchline to a joke she did not even understand. The internet was laughing, but for once Tasha was not laughing with them. She was the one being devoured. Kyle sat in the cramped living room of the short-term rental apartment Tasha had managed to secure using a prepaid debit card. The walls were thin, and he could hear the neighbors arguing about rent. It was a far cry from the Buckhead mansion, but it was all they could afford. He was scrolling through a crypto forum, hoping for a miracle tip that would turn his last $500 into $50,000, when a sharp knock rattled the door. He froze. He was not expecting anyone. Tasha was at a pawn shop trying to sell her designer handbags for cash. He crept to the peephole expecting another process server, or maybe a debt collector. Instead, he saw two men in dark windbreakers standing on the landing. They did not look like debt collectors. They looked like government agents. Kyle opened the door a crack. "Can I help you?" Kyle Henderson, one of the men asked, flashing a badge. "I am Agent Miller with the Internal Revenue Service, Criminal Investigation Division. We have a warrant to search these premises and seize all electronic devices. IRS." Kyle felt his knees buckle. "What is this about?" "I filed my taxes." "According to our records, you filed zero income for the last 3 years," Agent Miller said, pushing the door open. "However, we have received substantial evidence indicating unreported cryptocurrency gains totaling over $200,000, as well as the receipt of multiple large cash gifts that were not declared. We also have records of you using business loans for personal gambling debts, which constitutes fraud." Kyle stumbled back into the room. "Who told you that? That is private financial information. We received a comprehensive dossier from a concerned citizen," Agent Miller said, signaling his partner to start bagging Kyle's laptop. "It included blockchain transaction histories, screenshots of your trading accounts, and copies of the fraudulent loan applications you submitted online." It was very thorough, Mr. Henderson. It even included a text message where you bragged about hiding assets from your spouse. Zora. It had to be Zora. She had not just cut him off. She had dissected his financial life with surgical precision and handed the pieces to the feds. The text message he had sent her demanding $50,000 was probably part of the file, too, evidence of his desperation and his crimes. Wait, I can explain. Kyle stammered, backing away as the agents moved through the small apartment. I lost that money. I do not have it anymore. You cannot tax money I lost. Tax evasion is not about what you have left. Agent Miller said, unplugging Kyle's gaming console. It is about what you failed to report when you had it. And wire fraud is a federal offense regardless of your investment success. You are looking at significant prison time, Mr. Henderson. I suggest you call a lawyer. Kyle sank onto the cheap sofa, watching them pack up his life. He did not have money for a lawyer. He did not even have money for bail. Zora had played the long game. She knew about the crypto. She knew about the loans. She had been watching him drown for years, and now she had just handed the IRS an anchor. He realized with a sick feeling in his stomach that the orange sticker on the mansion door was the least of his problems. He was not just homeless. He was a federal target. Tasha was trying to film a makeup tutorial using the bathroom mirror lighting because the living room was too dark and dingy for her brand. She was halfway through applying concealer to hide the stress breakouts when a thunderous crash shook the thin walls. It sounded like the door was being kicked in. She dropped her blending sponge and ran into the hallway, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The front door of the cramped apartment was wide open, hanging off one hinge. 6 officers in tactical gear were swarming the small living room. Their weapons were drawn, and their voices were shouting commands that overlapped into a wall of terrifying noise. Kyle, get on the ground right now. Hands where we can see them. Do it now. Kyle was standing by the kitchenette holding a bowl of cereal. He looked like a deer in headlights, frozen in absolute terror. He dropped the bowl milk, splashing onto his bare feet and the cheap linoleum floor. He slowly raised his hands, his face draining of all color until he looked like a ghost. What is going on? Tasha screamed, running toward him. Who are you people? You cannot just break in here. We have rights. One of the officers stepped between her and Kyle, his hand held up in a warning gesture. Mom, stay back. We are executing a federal arrest warrant for Kyle Henderson. Kyle was shoved against the counter. He grunted as his cheek was pressed into the laminate. Handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists with a metallic finality that echoed in the small space. You have the wrong person, Kyle stammered, his voice high and terrified. I am a businessman. I trade crypto. I have rights. This is a mistake. You have the right to remain silent, the officer recited, spinning him around. You are under arrest for wire fraud, tax evasion, and money laundering. We have logs of multiple fraudulent loan applications submitted from your IP address and evidence of interstate wire fraud involving concealed assets. Tasha stared at her husband. Money laundering. Fraud. She thought he was just broke. She thought he was just bad with money. She did not know he was a criminal. She looked at the laptop the officers were bagging into an evidence container. That was the laptop she used to check her emails. Had he been committing crimes right next to her while she edited photos? Kyle, look at me, Tasha demanded, her voice shaking. What did you do? Tell them they are wrong. Tell them you are innocent. Kyle looked at her, but his eyes were empty. He was not looking at his wife. He was looking at his future disappearing. Zora, he whispered. She sent them everything, Tasha. She had the logs. She knew about the loans. She knew about the offshore accounts I tried to hide. She burned me. The officers hauled him toward the door. He stumbled over his own feet, tripping on the rug. Tasha watched him go, watched the man she thought was her ticket to the good life being dragged out like common trash. The neighbors were all out on the landing, watching with glee, phones recording. As the door closed, leaving her alone in the wrecked apartment, Tasha realized the true scope of Zora's revenge. Zora did not just cut the purse strings. She had surgically removed the cancer that was Kyle's financial life. And now Tasha was alone in a broken apartment with no money, no husband, and a reputation that was currently being escorted into the back of a squad car. The sun had barely risen over Atlanta when my personal line rang. It was a restricted number, but I knew exactly who was on the other end. Tasha had undoubtedly called our mother the second the police cruiser pulled away with her husband in the back, probably using a neighbor's phone since hers was likely seized as evidence. I tapped answer and set the phone down on the glass coffee table next to my morning espresso, waiting for the inevitable explosion. "You demon." The voice was ragged and shrill, so loud it distorted the speaker. It was Vernice. She sounded like she was hyperventilating, but the rage gave her stamina. "I hope you are happy, Zora. I hope you are satisfied. Tasha just called me from a payphone. She is hysterical. They took him. They took Kyle away in handcuffs like a common criminal. And they said you were the one who gave them the evidence. You, his own sister-in-law." I took a sip of my coffee, remaining perfectly silent. "He is a businessman," Zora Vernice screamed, her voice cracking. "Businessmen take risks. He was just trying to provide for your sister. He was trying to give her the life she deserves. And because you are so jealous, so bitter that no man wants you, you decided to destroy him. You could have just paid the debt. It was $50,000, Zora. That is nothing to you now. I saw the news. I know you have millions. You could have written a check and saved this family, but instead you chose to call the police." Her logic was so twisted, it was almost fascinating. In Vernice's world, Kyle committing federal wire fraud and identity theft was a noble risk. But me reporting an extortion attempt was an act of war. She truly believed that my money existed solely to cover their crimes. "You are evil," Vernice spat the word out like a curse. "You are a wicked, hateful child. I do not know where I went wrong with you. I raised you in the church. I taught you to love your family. And look at you. You are sitting up in some high tower looking down on us, destroying lives with a push of a button. You put your brother-in-law in a cage, Zora. You left your sister alone on the street. Does that make you feel big? Does that make you feel powerful?" I finally leaned forward toward the phone. "I did not put him in a cage, Mom," I said, my voice calm. "The federal government did. And I did not destroy his life. He did that when he tried to blackmail me with fake pornography. Did Tasha tell you about that part? Did she tell you he tried to extort me?" "He was desperate," Vernice shrieked, dismissing the felony instantly. "He was scared. You backed him into a corner when you cut them off. You forced his hand. It is your fault, Zora. All of it. If you had just kept paying the bills like a good daughter, none of this would have happened. You have blood on your hands. You are the devil, Zora, and God will punish you for what you have done to us." She hung up, leaving the echo of her curse hanging in the luxury silence of my penthouse. I looked at the phone. She did not care about the truth. She did not care about right or wrong. She only cared that the money was gone, and the shame was public. She called me evil for refusing to be a victim. I finished my coffee. If protecting myself made me the villain in her story, then I would happily play the role. At least the villain was free. The apartment looked like a hurricane had passed through it. The cushions were ripped off the sofa where the agents had searched for hidden drives. Tasha sat in the middle of the debris, clutching her phone like a lifeline. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but the tears had stopped. Now there was only a cold, hard vacuum where her heart used to be. She had lost her husband. She had lost her house. She had lost her status. And Zora was sitting in a penthouse, probably laughing. Vernice paced the small room, her heels clicking on the cheap laminate flooring. She had taken a taxi here after the call, bringing with her a bottle of wine she had managed to hide from the pawnshop transaction. She poured a glass into a plastic cup, her hands shaking with rage. "We cannot let her get away with this," Tasha whispered, staring at the wall. "She put Kyle in jail, Mom. She ruined my life. She has millions of dollars and she is letting us rot in this hole. She is a demon." Vernice agreed, taking a large gulp of wine. "She has forgotten where she came from. She thinks she is untouchable because of her money. But God does not like ugly Tasha. And he definitely does not like children who abandon their parents. Tasha looked down at her phone. She had been frantically searching for legal loopholes, ways to sue Zora for emotional distress or breach of contract, but every lawyer she called asked for a retainer she did not have. Then she stumbled upon a forum discussing elder law. Her eyes widened as she read the text. "Mom, listen to this," Tasha said, her voice gaining a sudden sharp edge. "Have you ever heard of filial responsibility laws?" Vernice frowned. "What is that? Some kind of charity?" "No." Tasha stood up, the phone glowing in her hand. "It is a law, Mom. In some states, children are legally required to provide for their indigent parents. If the parent cannot pay for food, housing, or medical care, the state can force the child to pay, especially if the child has the means." Vernice stopped drinking. She lowered the cup slowly. "Force her to pay." "Yes." Tasha scrolled faster, her excitement building. "It says here that if the parent is destitute and the child is wealthy, the court can order garnishment. It is not a gift, Mom. It is a legal obligation. You are sick, right? You have a heart condition. You have no income. And Zora is a documented millionaire." A slow smile spread across Vernice's face. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator realizing the cage door was unlocked. "I am destitute," she murmured, testing the word. "I am sick. I have medical bills piling up, and she has refused to help. That is negligence. That is abandonment." "We do not need to beg her anymore," Tasha said, looking at her mother with a terrifying intensity. "We do not need to ask nicely. We can drag her into court and make a judge order her to take care of you. We can garnish her wages, Mom. We can put a lien on that penthouse." Vernice set the cup down. "Call that lawyer Tasha, the one who hates Zora, the one who lost the case against her client last year. Tell him we have a new angle. Tell him we are going to sue her for everything she is worth." Tasha dialed the number. The despair in the room vanished, replaced by a toxic hope. They had found the weapon they needed. Zora thought she had cut the cord, but they were about to use the law to tie a noose around her neck. They were not just going to sue for money. They were going to sue for ownership of her life. I was reviewing a contract for a new client when my assistant buzzed the intercom. There was a hesitation in her voice that made me look up from the paperwork. She told me there was a man in the lobby who insisted on seeing me personally. He was not a client. He was not a reporter. He was a process server. I told her to send him in. I had been expecting something like this, perhaps a nuisance suit from Tasha for emotional distress or a desperate claim from Kyle. But when the man handed me the thick envelope, I felt a weight that had nothing to do with paper. "You have been served, Ms. Williams," he said, and walked out without another word, leaving the stench of cheap cologne and bad intentions in my pristine office. I slid the envelope open with my silver letter opener. The first page was a standard summons. The second page was where the nightmare began. It was a lawsuit filed in the Superior Court of Fulton County. The plaintiffs were listed as Vernice Williams and Tasha Henderson. The defendant was me. I scanned the legal jargon, my eyes catching on phrases that made my blood run cold. Filial responsibility, indigent status, failure to provide necessary sustenance. They were suing me under a law I thought had died in the 19th century. They were claiming that because I was wealthy and my mother was destitute, I was legally obligated to maintain her lifestyle. Then I saw the number. They were not asking for help with groceries. They were demanding a court-ordered monthly stipend of $10,000. $10,000 a month for the rest of her life to cover housing, medical expenses, and emotional rehabilitation. I laughed. It was a harsh sound that bounced off the glass walls. $10,000 was almost exactly the amount I had been voluntarily paying before they humiliated me. They did not want justice. They wanted their allowance back, and they were asking a judge to garnish my wages to get it. They claimed my mother was medically fragile, unable to work, and living in squalor because of my negligence. They painted a picture of a devoted mother abandoned by a heartless daughter who had struck it rich and forgotten where she came from. It was a work of fiction so audacious, it was almost impressive. I picked up the phone and dialed Marcus Vance. "I just got served," I said, staring at the demand for alimony from my own mother. "I know," Marcus replied, his voice tight. "I just got the courtesy copy, filial responsibility laws. It is a Hail Mary, Zora. It is the last move of a desperate player. They want 10,000 a month," I said, watching a hawk circle outside my window. "They want the government to force me to be their ATM. They are banking on you settling to avoid the embarrassment," Marcus said. "They think you will pay to keep this out of the press. They forgot who they are dealing with." "No, Marcus," I said, standing up. "They did not forget. They never knew. They think this is a shakedown. But they just handed me the opportunity to put every single one of their secrets into the public record. If they want a trial, I will give them a trial. But I am going to subpoena everything: her medical records, her bank statements, every lie she has ever told." I looked at the lawsuit one last time before tossing it onto my desk. They wanted a day in court. I was going to give them a funeral. I sat across from Marcus Vance in his private library, a room lined with leather-bound law books that smelled of old paper and expensive scotch. The lawsuit lay between us on the mahogany desk like a declaration of war. Marcus did not look worried. He looked like a shark that had just scented blood in the water. He flipped through the pages with a dismissive flick of his wrist, his eyes scanning the paragraphs of lies my mother and sister had concocted. "They are claiming indigent status," Marcus said, his voice low and amused. "They are claiming Vernice is totally disabled and unable to care for herself due to severe cardiac distress caused by your negligence. They have even included an affidavit from a doctor I have never heard of, claiming she needs 24-hour care." I leaned forward. "That is a lie. She drives herself to the mall. She hosts bridge club. The only thing disabling her is her ego." "Exactly," Marcus said, closing the file with a sharp snap. "And that is where they made their fatal mistake, Zora. By filing this lawsuit and making her health the central issue, they have waived her right to medical privacy. They have opened the door to discovery." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city he had conquered a dozen times over in court. "They think this is a shakedown," he continued, turning back to me with a predatory smile. "They think you will write a check to keep your mother's health records private. They think you will settle to avoid the spectacle of dragging a sick old woman through a trial. But they forgot that you know the truth." He walked back to the desk and placed his hands flat on the surface, leaning in until we were eye to eye. "We are not going to settle, Zora. We are going to counterattack. I am going to subpoena every medical record from every doctor she has seen in the last 10 years. I am going to subpoena Dr. Allister. I am going to get the itemized receipts for every single one of those $12,000 pharmacy bills." I felt a surge of adrenaline. "You are going to prove she is not sick." "I am going to prove she is an addict," Marcus corrected. "Not to drugs, but to luxury. We are going to show the judge that those life-saving treatments were actually vitamin drips and cosmetic enhancements. We are going to show that her heart condition is managed by aspirin, and that the only thing threatening her life is her refusal to live within her means." He picked up the phone and dialed his paralegal. "Get the investigators ready," he barked into the receiver. "I want a full forensic audit of Vernice Williams' medical history. I want to know every time she sneezed and how much she paid to have someone wipe her nose, and find out about this doctor who signed the affidavit. If he lied under oath, I want his license." He hung up and looked at me, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of the fight. "They want to use the law as a weapon," he said, his voice dropped dead serious. "They want to twist the statutes designed to protect the vulnerable and use them to extort the successful. Well, if they want to play the law, we will play the law. I am going to flip her medical history inside out. I am going to expose every lie, every fake symptom, and every wasted dollar. By the time we are done, the judge will see that the only thing wrong with your mother's heart is that it is made of stone. Get ready for court, Zora. We are going to put on a show." The Superior Court of Fulton County smelled of floor wax and quiet desperation. I sat at the defense table next to Marcus Vance, keeping my face perfectly neutral. Across the aisle, my mother sat in a wheelchair she had rented that morning. She was wearing a threadbare shawl I recognized from a donation bin drive 5 years ago. She was playing the part of the frail, abandoned invalid to perfection. But the star of today's show was Tasha. When the bailiff called Tasha Henderson to the stand, I almost didn't recognize my own sister. Gone were the designer labels, the 3-inch lashes, and the inch-long acrylic nails. She shuffled to the witness stand wearing a shapeless gray cardigan and flat shoes. Her face was scrubbed clean of makeup, leaving her looking pale and undeniably young. It was a costume designed to scream innocence and poverty. Her lawyer, a man named Mr. Gentry, who wore a suit that cost more than Tasha's alleged annual income, approached the stand with a somber expression. "Ms. Henderson, can you tell the court how your sister's decision to terminate financial support has impacted your mother's health?" Tasha let out a shuddering breath. Her chin wobbled. She looked directly at the judge, her eyes wide and wet. "It has been a nightmare. Your Honor," she whispered, her voice trembling just enough to force the room to lean in. "We are drowning. My mother Vernice is a sick woman. She has a heart condition that requires specialized care. When Zora cut us off, she didn't just stop paying bills. She signed a death warrant." She paused to wipe a tear with a crumpled tissue she pulled from her sleeve. "We have had to ration her heart medication." Tasha continued, a sob catching in her throat. "I have to choose between buying groceries and buying the pills that keep my mother alive. Last week I found Mom on the floor of her apartment. She had fainted because she was trying to save food for me. It broke my heart, and Zora knows. She knows we are suffering." Mr. Gentry nodded gravely. "And did you try to ask your sister for help?" Every day Tasha cried, tears now streaming freely down her face. "I begged her. I sent her photos of Mom in the hospital. I told her we were being evicted. But Zora just blocked my number. She lives in a penthouse in the sky, while her own mother sleeps on a mattress on the floor. She has millions, Your Honor. She flies on private jets. She throws parties for celebrities. And she won't even give us $1 for bread." I watched her performance with a mixture of disgust and professional admiration. If Tasha had applied this much dedication to a job, she would be running a Fortune 500 company by now. She was selling the narrative of the cruel, ungrateful daughter perfectly. The judge, a stern woman named Judge Harper, looked from the weeping girl on the stand to me. I saw a flicker of disapproval in her eyes. Tasha was winning the emotional argument. "Is there anything else you want the court to know?" Mr. Gentry asked softly. Tasha looked straight at me. Her eyes were full of venom, but her voice remained pitiful. "I just want my sister back," she sobbed. "I want the Zora who used to care about us." Money changed her. It turned her heart into ice. "Please, Your Honor, make her do the right thing. Do not let my mother die because Zora loves her bank account more than her blood." She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking violently. The courtroom was silent save for the sound of her weeping. It was a masterful scene. Marcus Vance leaned over to me and scribbled a single word on his legal pad. "Oscar." I looked at him and nodded slightly. Tasha had delivered a performance worthy of an award. But she forgot one thing. Acting is not evidence. And tomorrow, when Marcus stood up to cross-examine her, the curtain was going to come down hard. The morning sun filtered through the high windows of the courtroom, but it brought no warmth to the defense table. Marcus Vance stood up, buttoning his suit jacket with a slow, deliberate motion that signaled the end of the theatrical weeping and the beginning of the surgical dissection. He walked toward the witness stand where Tasha sat, looking less confident than she had the day before. Her gray cardigan seemed to itch, and her eyes kept darting toward her mother, who was still slumped in the wheelchair like a discarded doll. "Ms. Henderson," Marcus began, his voice filling the room without being loud. You testified yesterday that your mother is a gentle, loving woman who has only ever wanted the best for Zora. You claim that Zora's abandonment came out of nowhere and was an act of unprovoked cruelty. Is that correct? Tasha nodded vigorously. Yes. My mother is a saint. She prayed for Zora every day. She only ever tried to guide her. Zora just hated to hear the truth. The truth, Marcus repeated, testing the word. So you are saying under oath that your mother never verbally abused Zora, that she never humiliated her, that she never treated her with contempt? Never, Tasha said. Mom loves us both equally. Marcus stopped pacing. He turned to the judge. Your Honor, the defense would like to introduce Exhibit A into evidence. It is a video recording taken on Thanksgiving Day 2 years ago. It was filmed by Mr. Darius Williams, the plaintiff's nephew, who is present in the courtroom today. Mr. Gentry objected immediately, claiming relevance, but Judge Harper waved him down. The screens mounted on the walls flickered to life. The audio crackled first, the sound of silverware clinking on china. Then the picture resolved. It was the dining room from the first night. The angle was low, hidden behind a centerpiece, but the faces were high-definition clear. The courtroom watched in stunned silence as the scene unfolded. They saw Tasha in her Gucci dress giggling. They saw Kyle smirking. And then they saw Vernice. She was not the frail old woman trembling in the wheelchair today. On the screen, she was vibrant, sharp, and cruel. Her voice boomed through the speakers, clear as a bell. Zora is the desperate failure of this family, Vernice's digital avatar sneered. Her face twisted in a look of pure disdain. Look at her life. It is just pathetic. I pray a man takes on a burden like her. The video, Vernice laughed. It was a cold, ugly sound that seemed to suck the oxygen out of the courtroom. The video, Tasha laughed with her. Marcus paused the video on a freeze frame of Vernice's sneer. He turned back to Tasha, who was now staring at her hands, her face draining of color. Ms. Henderson, Marcus said, his voice hard as iron. You just testified that your mother treats Zora with love. Does calling your daughter a desperate failure and a burden in front of 15,000 people sound like love to you? Or does it sound like emotional abuse designed to break a person so they keep writing checks? Tasha opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The silence in the room was heavy. Judge Harper looked from the screen to the woman in the wheelchair. Her expression had shifted from sympathy to a cold, hard suspicion. The saintly mother narrative had just been exposed as a lie, and Marcus Vance was just getting started. Marcus Vance turned his attention to the back of the courtroom, where a man in a pristine white coat sat nervously clutching a briefcase. The defense calls Dr. Allister to the stand, Marcus announced. A ripple of unease went through the plaintiff's side. Vernice shifted in her wheelchair, her eyes darting from her lawyer to the doctor, who had treated her like royalty for 5 years. Dr. Allister took the stand, swearing to tell the whole truth. He looked uncomfortable. His practice relied on discretion and wealthy clients, not public cross-examinations about medical necessity. Dr. Allister Marcus began walking to the podium. You have been treating Mrs. Vernice Williams for 5 years. In your professional opinion, is she totally permanently disabled due to a cardiac condition? Dr. Allister loosened his tie. No, he said quietly. She has mild hypertension, which is easily managed with diet and exercise. Her heart function is within normal range for a woman of her age. Marcus nodded, holding up a stack of invoices. Then, can you explain these charges, doctor? $12,000 a month for pharmacy services, $5,000 a month for inpatient procedures. The plaintiffs claim these were life-saving treatments for a failing heart. Is that accurate? The doctor cleared his throat. Mrs. Williams insisted on a regimen of imported Swiss supplements, which are not FDA-approved or medically necessary, but are extremely expensive. The inpatient procedures were largely cosmetic. Vitamin drips, lymphatic drainage massages, and Botox injections, which she claimed were for migraine relief. We billed them under general wellness at her request, but they were not critical care. The courtroom buzzed. Vernice sank lower in her wheelchair, pulling her shawl tighter as if to hide from the truth. Marcus was not done. And the pain medication, Marcus asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. The plaintiff claims she is in constant agony. Is there a physiological reason for this pain? Dr. Allister looked at Vernice, then back at Marcus. Mrs. Williams has developed a dependency on high-grade painkillers. We have tried to wean her off, but she refuses. Her current physical distress is consistent with withdrawal symptoms because she can no longer afford the opioids she was taking recreationally. She is not disabled by heart failure, Mr. Vance. She is incapacitated by addiction to a lifestyle she cannot maintain. The silence that followed was absolute. The frail grandmother act had disintegrated. The judge looked at Vernice with cold fury. The woman who claimed to be dying for lack of care was actually just going through withdrawal from a luxury high she expected her daughter to fund. Vernice looked up, her eyes wide with panic, realizing that her medical history was no longer a shield, but a sword that had just cut her defense to ribbons. Marcus closed the file with a snap that sounded like a gunshot. No further questions, Your Honor. Marcus Vance walked back to the defense table and picked up a heavy banker box. He placed it on the witness stand in front of me. The sound of the cardboard hitting the wood echoed through the silent courtroom. It was a heavy, dull thud that sounded like a coffin closing. He looked at me and nodded, giving me permission to finally speak the language my family understood best. The language of money, Ms. Williams, Marcus said, his voice projecting to the back of the room. The plaintiffs claim that you have left them destitute. They claim you have contributed nothing to their well-being while you hoard your wealth. Can you tell the court what is inside this box? I placed my hand on the lid. These are bank statements, I said, my voice steady and clear. 10 years of bank statements, canceled checks, wire transfer confirmations, and credit card receipts. And what do these documents represent? Marcus asked. They represent the price of admission to this family, I said, looking directly at my mother. I opened the box and pulled out the first binder. I did not need to look at the numbers. I had memorized them in the dark hours of the night when I wondered why I was never enough. Item 1, I read aloud, holding up a statement. Monthly mortgage payments for the Buckhead residence occupied by Tasha and Kyle Henderson. $4,500 a month for 5 years, totaling $270,000. I paid for the roof over their heads while Tasha told the internet I was jealous of her lifestyle. I pulled out another file. Item 2. Lease payments for a vintage Jaguar and a Range Rover, neither of which I drive, totaling $72,000 over 3 years. I paid for them to look rich while I took the subway to meetings. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Tasha shrank into her seat, her face burning. But I was not done. Item 3. Miscellaneous medical and wellness expenses for Vernice Williams. This includes the $12,000 monthly pharmacy bills Dr. Allister just testified about. It includes spa treatments billed as physical therapy. It includes a private nurse who was actually a personal shopper. I looked at the judge. Your Honor, I had my accountant run the final numbers last night. In the last 10 years, I have transferred exactly $450,000 to these 2 women. That is nearly $500,000. The number hung in the air. $450,000. It was a fortune. It was enough to put a child through college. It was enough to buy a home outright. And I had poured it into a black hole of ingratitude. I did not abandon my mother. I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. I enabled her. I paid for every meal she ate. I paid for the clothes on her back. I paid for the very lawyer she hired to sue me today. I bought their dignity. I bought their silence. And the moment I stopped paying, they tried to destroy me. I closed the binder and pushed it away. I do not owe them a pension for giving birth to me, Your Honor. I have already paid my dues, 450,000 times over. I am done. Judge Harper looked at the stack of financial records. She looked at the total on the summary sheet. Then she looked at Vernice and Tasha. Her expression was not one of judicial neutrality anymore. It was the look of a woman who had seen enough. The financial autopsy was complete, and the cause of death for their lawsuit was greed. Judge Harper sat in silence for a long moment. The only sound in the courtroom was the hum of the air conditioning. She took off her reading glasses and set them down on the bench with a deliberate click. She looked at the stack of financial records I had provided, then she looked at Vernice, who was shrinking into her wheelchair, trying to look small and pitiable. Judge Harper was a black woman in her 50s, with eyes that had seen every scam, every hustle, and every lie Atlanta had to offer. She did not look impressed. She looked furious. She leaned forward over the bench, her gaze locking onto Vernice like a missile lock. "Mrs. Williams," the judge began, her voice low and dangerous. "In my 20 years on the bench, I have seen children abandon their parents. I have seen elderly people left to rot in nursing homes without a visitor for years. I know what neglect looks like." She picked up one of the bank statements and held it up, shaking it slightly for emphasis. "This is not neglect. This is a payroll. You have treated your daughter not as a child to be nurtured, but as a resource to be mined. You have taken nearly $500,000 from her while she built a career, and you thanked her by suing her for more." Vernice tried to speak, to muster some defense about her heart or her suffering, but the judge silenced her with a sharp raise of her hand. "Quiet. You have wasted this court's time. You have wasted taxpayer money. And worst of all, you have made a mockery of the very laws designed to protect the vulnerable. Filial responsibility laws exist to ensure that the elderly do not starve. They do not exist so you can maintain a lifestyle you cannot afford. They do not exist so you can buy imported vitamins and support a son-in-law who refuses to work." Judge Harper stood up, her black robes rustling with the force of her movement. She looked down at Vernice with pure disdain. "You are not indigent, Mrs. Williams. You are greedy. You are not a victim. You are a predator. You have attempted to weaponize the legal system to extort your own child. You are exploiting the concept of filial piety, twisting a sacred duty into a shakedown. It is shameful. It is a disgrace to this court, and it is a disgrace to the title of mother." She banged her gavel. The sound was like a thunderclap that signaled the end of the world for my mother and sister. "This case is dismissed with prejudice. That means you cannot refile. You cannot amend. It is over. Furthermore, I am ordering you to pay the defendant's legal fees. If you cannot pay them, I suggest you sell some of those luxury items your daughter bought you." Vernice let out a wail of despair, sinking back into her wheelchair, as if the judge's words had physically crushed her. I sat at the defense table, feeling the weight of 10 years lift off my shoulders. The judge had not just dismissed the case. She had validated my entire reality. She had spoken the truth that I had been too afraid to say out loud. I was not a bad daughter. I was a victim who had finally escaped. The sound of the gavel hitting the wood was the final nail in the coffin of Tasha's life. She sat frozen in the plaintiff chair, staring at the judge who had just dismissed her future. The words "dismissed with prejudice" echoed in her mind like a curse. It meant no money. It meant no house. It meant she was going back to the empty apartment with the broken door. She looked over at Zora. Her sister was calmly putting her expensive pen back into her designer bag. Zora looked unbothered. She looked radiant. She looked like she had just taken out the trash. Something inside Tasha snapped. It was a physical sensation, a hot wire breaking in her brain. The years of jealousy, the humiliation of the live stream, the arrest of her husband, it all boiled over into a blind white rage. She did not think. She did not plan. She just moved. "You witch!" Tasha screamed, a sound so raw and guttural it made the stenographer jump. "You stole my life!" She launched herself out of her chair, scrambling over the wooden divider that separated the plaintiff and defense tables. Her gray cardigan tore as it caught on the edge, but she did not stop. She was a missile of pure hatred aimed directly at Zora's throat. Mr. Gentry shouted her name, but it was too late. Tasha lunged across the aisle, her hands curled into claws, reaching for Zora's face. She wanted to wipe that calm expression off her sister's face. She wanted to hurt her the way Zora had hurt her bank account. "I will kill you!" Tasha shrieked, her fingers grazing the sleeve of Zora's white suit. "Give me my money. You owe me." Zora did not scream. She stepped back with the grace of a matador, letting the bull rush past. Marcus Vance stepped in front of her, shielding his client, but he did not need to do much. 2 bailiffs were on Tasha before she could take another step. One officer grabbed her waist, tackling her to the floor. The impact knocked the wind out of her, but she kept fighting, kicking and spitting like a wild animal. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Vernice was screaming from her wheelchair, clutching her chest. The judge was banging her gavel, shouting for order. "Get off me," Tasha yelled, thrashing against the marble floor. "She is the criminal. Arrest her. She stole my husband. She stole my house." "Stop resisting," the bailiff commanded, pinning her arms behind her back. The cold steel of handcuffs clicked onto her wrists, tight and unforgiving. It was the same sound she had heard when they took Kyle. Now it was her turn. Judge Harper stood up, her face a mask of absolute fury. "Take her into custody immediately," the judge ordered, pointing a shaking finger at Tasha, who was now being hauled to her feet. "That is contempt of court and assault on a defendant inside a courtroom. I want her booked, and I am revoking bail." Tasha looked up, her hair wild, her eyes manic. She looked at Zora one last time. Zora was brushing a speck of dust off her sleeve. She looked at Tasha with nothing but pity. "You are crazy!" Tasha screamed as they dragged her toward the side door. "You are going to hell, Zora. You hear me? You are going to hell." The heavy door slammed shut, cutting off her screams. The silence that followed was heavy and stunned. Zora picked up her bag and looked at Marcus. "Well," she said, her voice calm, "I guess we can add assault to the restraining order." The doors swung shut, silencing Tasha's screams, but the energy in the courtroom remained electric with shock. Judge Harper did not sit back down. She remained standing, her hands gripping the edge of the bench, her knuckles lighter than her skin tone. She took a deep, steadying breath before turning her gaze to Mr. Gentry, who was frantically stuffing papers into his briefcase, looking like he wanted to vanish into the floorboards. "Counsel," the judge said, her voice cutting through the stunned silence like a blade. "I am granting the defendant's motion for a permanent restraining order, effective immediately. This order covers Zora Williams, her home, her place of business, and any property she owns. It applies to both Tasha Henderson and Vernice Williams." Vernice let out a small whimper from her wheelchair. Judge Harper ignored her. "This is a lifetime order," the judge continued. "Any violation of this directive, including third-party contact, social media posts, or physical proximity within 500 yards, will result in immediate arrest. Do I make myself clear?" Mr. Gentry nodded rapidly. "Crystal clear, Your Honor." As for Ms. Henderson, the judge said, her eyes narrowing, "She is remanded to the custody of the Fulton County Sheriff. I am setting a hearing for the assault charges for next week. Until then, she will remain in detention. Attacking a litigant in open court is a felony, and I will not tolerate violence in my chambers. Bail is denied." I watched Vernice as the ruling came down. The woman who had terrorized me for decades, who had used guilt and manipulation like a master craftsman, was suddenly just a lonely old lady in a rented wheelchair. She looked at the empty space where Tasha had been, then she looked at me. For a second I thought she might scream. I thought she might launch into another tirade about how I was ungrateful or evil, but she did not. She just slumped. The fight had finally gone out of her because she realized she had no soldiers left. Tasha was in a cell, Kyle was in a cell, and I was behind a wall of steel-reinforced legal protection. Marcus handed me a pen. "Sign here," he whispered, pointing to the order the clerk had just placed on the table. I signed my name. The ink flowed smoothly, black and permanent. It felt different than signing a check. Signing checks had always felt like losing pieces of myself. Signing this felt like reclaiming the whole territory. "We are done here," Judge Harper said, banging the gavel one last time. Court is adjourned. Marcus packed up his files. He looked at me and smiled, a genuine warm expression that reached his eyes. You are safe now, Zora. Legally and physically safe. I stood up, smoothing the front of my white suit. I looked across the aisle one last time. Vernice was weeping softly into her hands, her lawyer whispering urgent advice she was clearly not listening to. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was not pity. It was the feeling of a heavy coat being taken off after a long winter walk. I turned my back on my mother and followed Marcus toward the exit. The air in the hallway tasted sweeter than any champagne I had ever drunk. I was untouchable. The parking garage beneath the courthouse was cool and smelled of damp concrete and exhaust fumes. I walked briskly toward my SUV, my heels clicking rhythmically on the pavement. Marcus walked beside me, a silent sentinel, ensuring I reached my vehicle without incident. I felt lighter than I had in years, as if the air itself was easier to breathe. The legal battle was over. The truth was public. I was free. Zora, wait. The voice was ragged and desperate. I stopped and turned. Vernice was standing near a concrete pillar. She had abandoned the wheelchair, likely because there was no audience left to perform for. She looked small and frail, stripped of her arrogance and her entourage. Her expensive shawl was slipping off her shoulders, and her makeup was streaked with tears. Marcus stepped in front of me, his hand raised. Mrs. Williams, you are violating the restraining order that was just issued. Step back immediately, or I will call the marshals. She ignored him. She lunged toward me, her hands grasping at the air. Zora, please. You cannot leave me like this. Tasha is in jail. I have no one. I have nowhere to go. They are going to evict me, Zora. I will be on the street. I am your mother. You cannot let your own mother sleep on the street. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had called me a failure. The woman who had laughed while I was humiliated. The woman who had tried to sue me for the money I earned while she slept. I searched my heart for a flicker of guilt, a spark of obligation. I found nothing. The well was dry. I opened my car door and slid into the driver's seat. The leather was cool and familiar. It smelled of safety. Vernice threw herself against the car. She grabbed the door handle, pulling uselessly against the lock. She pressed her face against the window, her eyes wide with panic. Open the door, she screamed, her voice muffled by the thick glass. Zora, listen to me. I am sorry. I will do whatever you want. I will apologize to everyone. Just give me another chance. I am scared, Zora. Please do not do this to me. I looked at her through the glass. She looked like a stranger mouthing words in a language I no longer spoke. I pressed the ignition button and the engine purred to life. I did not say a word. I did not write a check. I simply pressed the button on the armrest and watched the tinted window slide up, covering her desperate face inch by inch until she was gone. I put the car in drive and pulled away. In the rearview mirror, I saw Marcus stepping back as Vernice collapsed onto the concrete floor of the garage, sobbing into her hands. I did not turn around. I drove up the ramp and out into the bright, blinding sunlight of Atlanta. The road ahead was wide open, and for the first time in my life, I was the only one in the driver's seat. 6 months had passed since the gavel fell in Judge Harper's courtroom, but the echoes were still settling. I sat in my penthouse living room, the city of Atlanta, sprawling below me like a map of conquests. On the television screen, the local news was running a segment that brought a rare, genuine smile to my face. The headline read, "Local real estate agent sentenced in crypto fraud scheme." Kyle Henderson looked different in an orange jumpsuit. The arrogance that had fueled his smirk at my Thanksgiving table was gone, replaced by the hollowed-out look of a man who had realized too late that he was not the smartest person in the room. He stood before a federal judge, his head bowed as the sentence was read. 3 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of probation and restitution of $200,000 to the IRS. Marcus Vance sat across from me, sipping a scotch. He had attended the sentencing on my behalf, a silent reminder to Kyle that I was watching. He cried when they took him away, Marcus said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. He tried to blame Tasha. He tried to blame the market. He even tried to blame you, claiming your financial support had enabled his gambling addiction. The judge did not buy it. She called him a parasite. I watched the footage of Kyle being led away in handcuffs. This was the man who had called me pathetic. The man who had lived in my house, driven my car, and spent my money while mocking my existence. Now he was going to a place where his vintage coats and crypto wallets meant nothing. I felt a profound sense of closure. It was not joy, exactly. Joy is warm. This was cold and hard like a diamond. It was the satisfaction of balance being restored. Kyle had tried to steal a life he did not earn, and now he was paying for it with the only currency he had left: his time. 3 years, I said, turning off the TV. It does not seem like enough for the damage he caused. It is enough to break him, Marcus replied. Federal prison is not a country club, Zora. He will come out with a felony record, no license, and a mountain of debt he can never discharge in bankruptcy. His life as he knew it is over. I walked to the window. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. I thought about the check I had written for his gambling debt 2 years ago. I thought about how he had hugged me and called me his angel. I wondered if he was thinking about that moment now in his cell. I wondered if he realized that the angel had turned into the sword of justice. He wanted a free ride, I said softly. Well, he got one. Straight to the penitentiary. Marcus raised his glass in a toast. To justice. To freedom, I corrected, clinking my glass against his. And to never signing another check for a man who does not know my worth. Kyle was gone, erased from the board. 1 pawn down, 2 to go. The fluorescent lights of the Walmart supercenter buzzed with a low headache-inducing hum that seemed to drill directly into Tasha's skull. She stood behind register 4 wearing a blue vest that was 2 sizes too big. Her feet, which were used to the arch of designer heels, throbbed in a pair of discount sneakers she had bought from the clearance aisle 3 aisles over. She scanned a family pack of toilet paper, then a gallon of milk, listening to the relentless beep of the machine. It was a sound that had replaced the applause she used to crave. Receipt in the bag, she asked, her voice dull and mechanical. The customer snatched the bag without saying thank you. Tasha stared at the conveyor belt, wishing she could dissolve into it. This was her reality now. No mansion, no Jaguar. Just an 8-hour shift, standing on concrete, serving people she used to look down on. Oh my God, it is her. The whisper came from the line behind her. Tasha froze. She kept her eyes on the screen, praying she had misheard. It is totally her, a girl giggled. Look at the nose. That is the girl who got dragged out of the gala, the one who tried to frame her sister. Tasha looked up. 3 teenage girls were standing there holding phones up, recording her. They were wearing trendy clothes, the kind Tasha used to review on her channel. Now they were looking at her like she was a zoo animal. Hey Tasha, one of the girls called out, snapping her gum. Where is the Gucci? I thought you were too good for Walmart. Tasha felt the heat rise in her cheeks. Please stop filming, she said, her voice shaking. I am just trying to do my job. Job? The girl laughed. I thought being a failure was your full-time job. Does Zora know you are scanning groceries? Maybe she will tip you if you ask nicely. The girls erupted in laughter. The customers in the next lane turned to look. Tasha felt the walls closing in. She saw the flashes of the cameras capturing her in the blue vest, capturing her falling apart. This video would be online in minutes. The caption would be brutal. The comments would be worse. Manager to register 4. Tasha shouted, her voice cracking, not caring about professional conduct anymore. She abandoned the register, leaving the belt running. She ran to the break room, slamming the door behind her and collapsing onto a plastic chair. She pulled out her phone. Her hands were trembling so hard she almost dropped it. She opened Instagram. Her follower count had plummeted, but her notifications were maxed out. Every single comment was a variation of the same insult. Clown, broke, jealous. She looked at the last photo she had posted months ago, a picture of her and Kyle in front of the mansion she never owned. The caption read, "Built different." The top comment posted 2 minutes ago said, "Built for minimum wage." Tasha stared at the screen. This app had been her life. It had been her validation, her currency, her identity. But now it was just a mirror reflecting her ruin. She realized with a crushing weight that she could never go back. The influencer Tasha was dead. She navigated to the settings menu. Her finger hovered over the red text. Delete account. Do it, she whispered to herself, tears dripping onto the cracked screen. Just disappear. She tapped the button. A confirmation box asked if she was sure. She tapped yes. The screen went black, then reset to the login page. Her profile, her photos, her thousands of followers gone. She did the same for TikTok, then Twitter. One by one, she erased her digital existence. She sat in the break room of a Walmart Anonymous, and alone with nothing left but a blue vest and a name that was now a punchline. The radiator in Unit 4B rattled with a metallic cough that sounded like a dying lung. Vernice sat on a second-hand floral sofa that smelled faintly of cat urine and stale smoke. She pulled her cardigan tighter around her shoulders, not because it was cold, but because the apartment felt hollow. It was a Section 8 unit on the outskirts of Atlanta, miles away from the manicured lawns of Buckhead. The view from her single window was a dumpster and a chain-link fence. On the laminate coffee table sat a letter. It was printed on heavy cream stock, the only expensive thing left in the room. It was from Greater Hope Baptist Church. Vernice had read it a dozen times, but the words still burned her eyes. It was a formal notice of excommunication. The Board of Deacons, the same people she had judged and commanded for 30 years, had voted unanimously to revoke her membership. They cited financial malfeasance regarding the building fund and conduct unbecoming of a Christian woman following the public exposure of her abuse toward her daughter. She reached for her phone out of habit. She wanted to call Sister Patterson. Sister Patterson always listened to her complaints about Zora's ungratefulness. She dialed the number, her fingers trembling. It rang twice before being sent straight to voicemail. Vernice dialed again. This time it picked up. Sister Patterson. Vernice said, her voice pitching high with desperate relief. Thank God you answered. You have to help me. They sent me a letter. They cannot do this. I am a church mother. Vernice, stop calling me. The voice on the other end was cold and hard. I saw the bank records, Vernice. We all did. You stole from the soup kitchen fund. You stole from the Lord to buy handbags. Do not call this number again. The circle has closed and you are on the outside. The line went dead. Vernice stared at the phone. The silence that followed was absolute. For decades, her voice had been the loudest in the room. She had commanded attention with her hats and her judgments. Now she could scream and no one would hear her. A heavy thud came from the ceiling. Her upstairs neighbor was stomping around. Keep it down there, a voice shouted through the thin floorboards. Nobody wants to hear your crying, old lady. Vernice shrank back into the sofa. Old lady, not Mrs. Williams, not church mother, just an old lady in a cheap apartment. She looked at the small kitchenette where a box of generic tea bags sat on the counter. There were no Swiss supplements. There were no private doctors. There was just the reality she had created. She closed her eyes, and for a fleeting moment she imagined Zora walking through the door. Zora would fix the radiator. Zora would buy her a better heater. Zora would yell at the neighbor. But then she remembered the sound of the car window rolling up in the courthouse garage. She remembered the look in Zora's eyes. It was not anger. It was indifference. Vernice realized with a terror that settled deep in her bones that she was not just poor. She was forgotten. She had spent her life talking, and now in the end there was no one left to listen. She was the queen of an empty kingdom ruling over dust mites and regrets, while the daughter she despised lived in a castle she had built herself. Darius sat on the edge of the cream-colored velvet sofa in my penthouse living room, looking like he was waiting for a sentencing hearing. He kept fidgeting with the zipper of his hoodie, his eyes darting around the expansive space that overlooked the entire city of Atlanta. He had seen the news. He knew what happened to Kyle. He knew Tasha was scanning milk at Walmart. He knew Vernice was alone. In his 19-year-old mind, he probably thought he was next on the chopping block, because he was the one who held the phone. Zora. He started, his voice cracking slightly. I just wanted to say I did not mean to cause all that trouble. I just thought the internet would think it was funny. I did not know it would blow up your whole life. I walked over to the wet bar and poured 2 glasses of sparkling cider. I handed one to him and sat down in the armchair opposite him. I looked at him closely. He looked tired. He had been dealing with Vernice's harassment for months, shielding me while playing the confused teenager. You did not blow up my life, Darius, I said, taking a sip. You saved it. That video was the evidence I needed to prove emotional abuse. It was the catalyst that set me free. You did not cause the fire. You just turned on the lights so everyone could see who was holding the matches. Darius relaxed, his shoulders dropping an inch. So you are not mad. Mad? I smiled. Darius, I am impressed. You have an eye for framing. You caught the perfect angle of her sneer. You kept the camera steady when she started yelling. That takes talent. I gestured to the large pile of boxes stacked in the corner of the room. They were wrapped in matte black paper with silver ribbons. Those are for you, I said. Darius looked at the pile, then back at me. For me? Is it my birthday? It is payday, I corrected. Go ahead. Open them. He walked over to the stack cautiously. He tore the paper off the biggest box. Inside was a hard-shell Pelican case. He popped the latches and gasped. It was a red Komodo cinema camera, complete with a set of prime lenses, a stabilizer rig, and a professional shotgun microphone. It was the kind of gear Hollywood cinematographers used. The kind of gear a kid from our neighborhood could only dream of renting, let alone owning. Zora, he whispered, running his hand over the matte black finish of the camera body. This is like $20,000 worth of equipment. You want to be a filmmaker, right? I asked. You cannot make films on an iPhone forever. The world needs to see what you see, Darius. You have a gift for capturing the truth. I want you to use it. He looked up at me, tears welling in his eyes. Thank you. I do not know what to say. There is one more thing. I handed him a thick white envelope. He opened it. Inside was a letter of acceptance to Howard University's School of Communications along with a receipt. The receipt showed a wire transfer covering 4 years of tuition, room board, and books, paid in full. You got in, I said. I pulled some strings with the dean to get your application looked at early, but your portfolio did the rest. You start in the fall. Darius dropped the letter. He covered his face with his hands and started to sob. Not the fake tears Tasha had cried for the camera, but deep heaving sobs of relief. He had been terrified he would end up like Kyle, trapped and broke. Now he had a future. You are the only one who ever helped me, he choked out. I stood up and put a hand on his shoulder. You helped me first. You stood up for me when no one else would. We take care of our own, Darius, the real ones. Now pack up that gear. You have a lot of work to do before semester starts. Watching him load the equipment into the car I had arranged to take him home, I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with revenge. Destruction was necessary, but building was the real victory. I had cleared out the weeds, and now I was planting seeds in the only soil that deserved them. Snow swirled outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of my Tribeca penthouse, painting the New York skyline in shades of white and gray. Inside, the fire was roaring, and the air smelled of cinnamon cloves and genuine laughter. It was Christmas Eve, a year after the explosion that had leveled my old life and built the foundation for this one. I looked around the room at the people holding crystal flutes of vintage champagne. There was no tension here. No one was judging my outfit or calculating my net worth. No one was waiting for a mistake so they could pounce. Marcus Vance was standing by the fireplace laughing at a story Darius was telling. Darius looked older now, more confident. His freshman year at Howard had transformed him. He was wearing a fitted blazer and holding his new cinema camera, but this time he wasn't hiding in a corner documenting abuse. He was center stage sharing his vision for his student film. Trayvon Booker, the quarterback whose career I had saved, was sitting on the sofa teaching my assistant Marcus how to hold a football properly. They were both laughing, their heads thrown back in unself-conscious joy. Even the mayor of Atlanta had sent a gift basket, though he could not attend. This was my family now. My chosen family. The people who showed up when the check wasn't clearing. The people who defended my name in rooms I wasn't in. The people who loved Zora. The woman, not Zora, the ATM. I walked over to the buffet table. I had hired a catering team because, unlike my mother, I didn't believe in making guests work. But I had made one thing myself: a turkey. It sat in the center of the spread, golden and perfect. I remembered the last turkey I had made, the one I never got to eat because I was too busy being insulted. This time I sliced a piece for myself. It tasted like victory. Darius came over and put an arm around my shoulder. "This place is insane, Zora," he said, looking out at the Empire State Building glowing red and green in the distance. "I still cannot believe we made it out." "We did not just make it out, Darius," I said, clinking my glass against his. "We broke the cycle." He nodded, his expression turning serious for a moment. "You know, I got a text from Tasha yesterday. She wanted to know if I had your new number. She said she was working a double shift at the store and needed help with rent." I felt a phantom twinge of anxiety, but it vanished as quickly as it came. "What did you tell her?" "I told her I lost my contacts when I got my new phone." Darius grinned, mischievous and sharp. "And then I blocked her." I laughed, a true deep sound that came from my belly. "Good." I looked back at the room. This was what success looked like. Not the money, although the penthouse was nice. It was the peace. It was the ability to stand in a room full of people and know that not a single one of them wanted to hurt me. I had traded a bloodline that bled me dry for a circle that filled me up. And as the snow fell, covering the city in a blanket of silence, I knew I had made the trade of a lifetime. The festivities were winding down, settling into the comfortable hum of late-night conversations and the clinking of silverware against china. I stood near the floor-to-ceiling window holding a glass of vintage Pinot Noir, watching the snow blanket the city below. The warmth of the fireplace and the genuine laughter of my friends created a cocoon of safety I had never known existed. For the first time in my life, I was not waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was not bracing for an insult or calculating the cost of acceptance. I was just Zora. My personal phone sat on the edge of the marble bar top. It was the only thing in the room that did not belong to this new life. Suddenly it began to vibrate. The harsh buzzing sound cut through the soft jazz music like a warning siren. I walked over to it slowly. The screen was lit up with a notification that made my stomach tighten for a fraction of a second before the feeling was replaced by a cool wave of indifference. The caller ID read Fulton County Correctional Facility. It was Kyle. Or perhaps it was Tasha calling from a borrowed phone in booking if she had violated her parole. Or maybe it was Vernice calling from a payphone outside a shelter using her last quarter to beg or curse me one last time. The room went quiet as Marcus noticed the phone. He looked at me, his eyebrows raised in a silent question. Darius stopped mid-sentence, his eyes flicking to the screen. They all knew what that buzzing meant. It was the ghost of my past trying to drag me back into the darkness. I picked up the phone. The vibration hummed against my palm, relentless and demanding. I stared at the screen for a long moment. I could answer. I could listen to the apologies or the threats. I could record them for another lawsuit. I could relish in their misery. But then I looked around the room. I looked at the people who loved me without conditions. I looked at the life I had built from the ashes of their betrayal. I realized that I did not need their apologies. I did not need their misery. I did not need them at all. I walked over to the silver ice bucket where a bottle of Dom Perignon was chilling in a bath of half-melted ice water. I held the phone over the bucket. The screen was still flashing, the call was still trying to connect. Zora Marcus started, a small smile playing on his lips. "What are you doing?" "I am taking out the trash," I said softly. I opened my hand. The phone fell with a heavy splash, plunging into the ice water. It sank to the bottom, nesting between the crystal cubes. The screen flickered once, bright and frantic, and then went black. The buzzing stopped. The connection was severed. I watched the bubbles rise to the surface for a second before turning my back on the bucket. I picked up my wineglass and raised it high. The light from the chandelier caught the deep red liquid, making it look like a heart beating. "To family," I said, my voice ringing clear and strong in the silence. "The one we choose. And to the beautiful, expensive price of freedom." Everyone raised their glasses. "Here is to freedom," Darius cheered. I took a sip. It was the best thing I had ever tasted. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the tracks of who I used to be, leaving a pristine white canvas for who I was going to become. The phone was dead, but I had never been more alive. Zora's journey reveals a powerful truth: shared blood does not guarantee loyalty, nor does it excuse abuse. For years, she equated financial support with love, only to discover that you cannot buy respect from those determined to exploit you. True liberation comes not from revenge, but from the courage to sever toxic ties and redefine your own value. We learn that family is a title earned through behavior, not birthright. Sometimes the greatest act of self-love is walking away from the people who raised you to find the chosen family who will truly rise with you. If Zora's victory inspired you to set your own boundaries, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice and resilience.